Welcome to the Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions. We've got stories to tell and solutions to deliver for your gymnastics business. New listeners, please subscribe to all of our social media pages so you don't miss out on any valuable content. And hit the like button or leave us a comment, which helps us to continue to produce great episodes like these. Today, I have a couple of very good friends of mine in studio, all the way from San Antonio, Texas. Welcome to the show, Steve and Gaby Arkell. How are y'all doing?
Great. Thank you for having us.
Flight good yesterday?
Excellent. Good meal last night.
I was going to say, how about the meal last night? That was a good dinner, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've talked a little bit on this show and several times with you that in the gymnastics world, I call it there's circles, right? You have this very big, very general circle that maybe just is all the gymnastics clubs, anybody who, even if they just compete at very low levels or whatever like that. And then the slightly smaller circle in there is maybe the coaches and clubs that are consistently bringing kids to like Easterns or Westerns or DP nationals or whatever. And then the circle gets really tight for the people that manage to break into the elite world. And then there's this like little bullseye in the middle of that has the coaches that are perennially in the elite world and have had international experience and like that. And I have been very fortunate in my career at two different times to be able to stick a toe in the tiny circle. I never made it all the way to the bullseye in the center. And because I'm an outgoing, friendly guy, I make friends with all the people that are in that circle and people like you guys who are in the bullseye, right? This is probably a gesture that is going to be hilarious to the folks on YouTube right now. But I make friends with all the people like you guys that are sort of in that bullseye, that center ring and whatever, talk to everybody. And because the bulk of gymnastics people are way on the outside of that tiny little circle, they don't get to know what's happening in there. And because I have friends that are in there, I bring them on this show and then we sort of say, here's some cool stories, right? So if you're not regularly inside that circle, you may not know who these two great folks are. So I'm going to give my audience sort of a quick, abbreviated, although it's not going to seem very abbreviated, it's going to take forever to do, resume of some of your accomplishments. So Gaby, let's start with you. You have had multiple Hopes Championship qualifiers, multiple Level 9 national champions, multiple Level 10 national champions, and multiple Division I scholarship athletes on your own, independent.
Yes.
Not with Steve, right? Steve, on your own, you were former Canadian national team coach, USA national team coach, international medal-winning athletes for both Canada and the United States. You're currently on the U.S. national team staff. You've had multiple 9 and 10 national champions yourself. You are a 7-time Coach of the Year recipient. And you've had more than 80 NCAA Division I scholarship winners.
That's because I'm old. I've been around for a long time.
Well, listen, I know a lot of old gymnastics coaches who haven't accomplished a fifth of that. And then it gets worse. Because once the two of you got together and said, hey, why don't we get married and coach some gymnastics together, you have since had multiple Level 9 and 10 national champions, multiple Hopes Championship qualifiers, dozens of collegiate scholarship winners, national team staff, and you've had 6 of your former athletes turn into NCAA coaches.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty neat.
Yep.
And probably, if I recall from some of our earlier conversations, the thing that you guys might say in that list that you're most proud of together is the fact that your athletes have gone on to become highly successful, like inner circle coaches.
Yes, one of the satisfactions that gymnastics or coach gymnastics has brought us is that, that they love the sport and they stay around and they want to give back for whatever reason they stay in gymnastics. Or
that not only were you guys technically such good coaches that they were able to succeed at these levels, but what you did was you fostered the love of the sport in these guys. You sort of nurtured that love of the sport so that when they were done, they couldn't be done. right? They had to continue on in the only way they could, which was to coach.
Yeah. I mean, I think that anytime you do something that's passionate and you like it, and later you feel like it shaped you and made you a better person, you might want to do it and give back to somebody else. So
Wow.
it's a neat feeling. It's like, having an athlete bring her child back to you.
Yeah.
To coach.
My wife and I always said, even in the very beginning, how will we know we were successful as coaches? And our answer was, when our athletes grow up and have kids of their own, that not only will they sign their kids up for gymnastics because their experience was so good, that if they live anywhere near the town where we own a gym, they would bring them right to where we are. And we call those kids legacies, and we have dozens of legacies
Yeah,
running
That's
around
fun.
our gym
That's
at
fun
this
to-
point.
to
Yeah.
watch.
Ken, I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What is a quick story that got you in the heart? One of the best things that you ever did for someone that they came back and said something to you.
I had an athlete that I coached from when she was probably 4 until gymnastics essentially told her she needed to retire when she was 16, almost 17 years old. And during the process of me coaching her, her parents went through a really nasty divorce. And at the time, her dad was not being super mature about this whole thing and wouldn't take the girls to practice because her older sister also did gymnastics, wouldn't go to meets, finally showed up at some point in the career, showed up to a meet and laid down in the bleachers and took a nap the whole time. I can't tell you how many times this kid would be in my arms crying. One example was, when we got here today, I made the statement, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So we always required our athletes to arrive at the venue ready to go 15 minutes prior to the start of their session. And ready to go means you're in your warm-ups, your hair's done, everything you need is in your bag, and you're just waiting for Coach Ken to come get you and bring you on the floor, right? Well, we're 15 minutes into warm-up, into general stretch, and this kid comes running in late. And at this point, she was 5, and she was a super tiny thing. And I put my arms out to the side like, hey, where were you? And she misinterprets the putting my arms out into the side like, hey, he wants me to jump up and give him a big hug. And so she jumps up on me, wraps her arms around me, buries her face in my shoulder and just starts sobbing. I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm so sorry I'm late. What a burden on a 5-year-old, by the way. Anyway, when she was about 13 or 14 years old, we're coaching bars, and back there in the bars area was like the stereo. I was screwing around with the iPod or whatever to get a song on that I liked or whatever. And she comes over right there, right before bars and says, Coach Ken, can I talk to you? This is kind of important. And I said, well, sure. What's on your mind? And she just starts sobbing. And I mean the kind of sobbing where her whole body is shaking and tears are falling down. And she's like, I just love you so much. And I don't know where I'd be without you. And I know you know what's going on with both of my parents. And I look at you like a dad. And I just want to say how much I appreciate who you are and what you've meant to me. And I've had plenty of times in my life where I kind of knew like, hey, but to have a kid, because that's what she was at 13 years old, like already realize the impact and then thank me for it, because we don't do it for the thank yous, right?
Yeah.
That was a gut punch because I wasn't ready for it, but a very pleasant gut punch. That's a crazy question. Why are you bringing that up? This is my show. I'll ask the questions.
Yeah. We do a lot of high level stuff, and that's exciting stuff. But we communicate with our athletes a lot, and so we ask them, why are you doing gymnastics? What do you want to get out of it? And we work with a multitude of kids. We don't just work with top kids. We worked with quote unquote regular kids, and we asked them the other day, what do you guys want out of gymnastics? And one of them, who struggles, has lots of anxiety, like lots of kids do today, more than I remember 10 years ago, anyway. And she says, well, I really like it. I like the physicality, and I want to challenge myself with my anxiety, right? So she realizes, that she has it.
What a mature perspective.
I know.
How old is this kid?
12.
Yeah, middle schooler.
Cow.
Yeah, middle schooler.
Holy cow.
And then we asked him, well, what do you like about your coaches? How can we help you? And she says, well, you never give up on me. Right. And
Wow.
Above all the other things and the accolades and the things we talk about, those are the things that are really important, like what you went through.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things I was going to ask after I read your 5-mile long resume is, do you guys have any like really lofty goals? Like, is it even on your radar to say something like, hey, one day I think we'd like to try to get a kid on the Olympic team? Or is that an unfair or unrealistic goal? I don't know. Talk to me. What do you guys think?
I think we all have those kind of goals, right? But
Yeah, I
you have
guess.
to be like one day at a time, and the athlete that you have in front of you, and if it's realistic or not realistic. One of the things that I think we do the best is being real about it. It could be very talented. It could be like physically, an athlete could be a potential Olympic athlete, but what's in between? Is it gonna last? How's the family? There's a lot of variance in there. So in our goals, I think we're very realistic. Yes, of course, we would like to be there, right? Because that's what we
So
do
there
at this high level.
is, at Mavericks Gymnastics, there is a pursuit of that Olympic dream. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's not you won't consider yourselves failures if you don't make it there. But the aspiration exists, and because I know the two of you to be very intentional people, you are intentionally developing athletes in such a way that if the right circumstance and the right timing comes along, you will be good and well prepared.
Absolutely.
Would like to do it.
Yeah, we don't ignore those things or pretend. We look at kids, how old are they in the Olympic year?
Yep.
Where are they going? And then, you shoot your shot.
And you don't specifically try to get a senior elite in a year when you know it's going to be a down senior elite just so you can get a jacket that you never get because the kid decides I got a scholarship to Georgia now, so I don't want to do elite anymore.
And Ken, I'm going to send you a jacket.
Oh, man. I'm going to wear it. And I'm going to tell everybody I earned it. I earned it by badgering Steve Arkell to death. For my audience member, I just made an inside joke. And what was happening is there was a point in my gymnastics career where I had this really talented kid who had qualified senior elite on a couple of events. And I qualified her that because I knew after the 2021 Olympics, like is true after all the Olympics, all the seniors take a year off.
It's a great opportunity for the new seniors.
Yep. So if you have a kid that's any good at all, like this is your chance to get an international assignment. And this kid had a double full on floor, and we talked about it, double on floor, double layout on floor, double Arabian.
Big stuff.
Yeah. We weren't doing anything for the U.S. on bars or beam because she didn't swing on FIG and beam wasn't her thing. But we were going to get an assignment. And all I could think about in my own mind was, I can't wait to get that jacket that says USA on the back, man. Like, this is why I'm doing this thing. And then in the midst of that, she committed to a full scholarship to the University of Georgia and said, hey, Coach Ken, I don't want to do JO routines and elite routines anymore. Can we just do JO? And I'm like, no, my jacket. And so we were talking about that at dinner last night and all the lamentations I had about not having a USA jacket.
A word of advice I would give to anyone that wants to do gymnastics is jump in and do it. And
see what it's about.
See what it's about, and take the opportunities to go in and, learn from the staff. And as well, there's nothing better than going in and watching people that are good at something. You're going to learn really fast.
Oh my gosh, my wife and I say that all the time. Like there's things that we're not interested in at all in the world. But if we see somebody that's at the top of their game, we'll sit and watch. Like I tell this story about Charlie Daniels when he was alive, went to our church. And I don't care about fiddle playing. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to go to a local fiddle concert or whatever the heck they do, but I would watch that man for hours on end play fiddle.
Devil went down to Georgia.
Yeah, because he is literally one of the best ever.
Yeah.
All right. So let me get into the sort of stories to tell part of this. And I want to start with Gaby. Gaby, you grew up in Mexico. All right. So your gymnastics journey is
different.
Different. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about how you got started. Why did you get involved in the first place? Kind of what was it like doing gymnastics in Mexico?
Well, I started gymnastics when I was 5 years old, and the gym that I went to was part of the university, the state university. My mom worked there, and she was friends with all these coaches, and just like, okay, you taught yourself how to do a cartwheel by yourself, so I think you could be good at this. So I started in, your recreational
Do they
classes.
call cartwheel in Spanish? Or
Yeah,
do they call it
literally,
something?
rueda de
Okay.
carro, yeah.
Okay.
Literally.
Oh, no, well, see, no, it's,
Back. Yeah,
yeah. But
shift your head.
there is a Spanish word for cartwheel.
Mhm.
Because, there's like some words that they just, whatever it is.
The
it's
last
same.
name, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same. But cartwheel.
Cartwheel is rueda de carro.
Okay. All right. There you go, audience.
Spanish lessons at the same time.
Thank you for listening to the Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions. The daily rigors of owning a gymnastics business present unique challenges. Get a gymnastics business mentor, one who's been in the trenches for more than 25 years to walk with you through those challenges. One of our mentors will provide you with strategic business planning, a sounding board for problem solving, general gymnastics business tips, and more. Inquire today about our gold medal business package for a year-long mentorship program with one of our team of experts.
So I started recreational classes, and then they just saw me, and I guess I wasn't very long there when they put me in pre-team and started working with the team. And back then it was different, right? Because the gym there was starting.
Can you give us a general era? We don't have to. The audience doesn't need to know how old you are, especially because you look so young. I don't want to give anything away. But the reason I'm asking is when I started my gymnastics career, it was at my elementary school. I was probably in first or second grade, and the principal made an announcement over the thing and said, "Hey, anybody that wants to do gymnastics, show up to school an hour early tomorrow and come to the gymnasium." And so we'd show up to the gymnasium and we'd have to pull all the equipment out of storage and roll it out there. And it was all crap equipment. And for an hour, we would stand in line and take turns. And when it was all done, we'd put all the equipment back and then go to class. But
no, this one was already we have a building already, big. I know, like a...
Because you did it in association with the local university where your mom
yeah.
worked, right? Okay.
Yeah, so they just moved to this big location the university gave us, because before that they were training...
Give us a decade. What decade was this?
It was in the 80s.
Okay.
It was before, when
because I was in the
transition
70s
between the bars. You remember how the bars used to be like oval and then they switched to circular?
Yeah.
That kind of time.
Oh, so you got to use circle bars.
I got to use the end of the oval, and then we didn't have a table. It was like the regular skinny horse,
Yeah,
and
the Twinkie horse.
Yes,
is what I think the kids call it.
So our gym was starting
Well equipped and everything.
Well equipped.
Well, compared to what I had to do.
Well, right? we did have pit in that gym.
Pit, holy cow!
Yeah.
Like when I say we would unroll the equipment, this is what we did to tumble on. We had like 8 or 9 different mats that were different thicknesses, different widths, different lengths. They did not Velcro together. I don't even think Velcro was invented yet. You just pushed these mats together in a line and you ran down there and you tumbled on these things. And sometimes they slid and came apart and you landed in a crack. So you had actual gymnastics equipment.
We had Nissan equipment, yes.
Oh my gosh. All right. Wow. Sounds like you were the rich kid over there.
Well, we're living so close to the border, a lot of that, I'm assuming it was donation.
I lived inside the border and I didn't have that stuff.
And but it was rough. I mean, you're talking, we didn't have any weights. It was like gallons of milk full with sands. We didn't have a spring floor. The parents built one, a strip with
valve springs.
Valve springs are an engine.
So that's what we had for a tumbling strip. That was our floor. You wanted to do new skills.
Still nicer than mine.
And then our boards were your typical board with 2 footballs underneath.
Inside it,
that was our
inflatable balls.
A bladder board.
Yep. I remember those.
that was it. So it was a lot of like a mix of good equipment and like made up,
So were you any good? Like, did you get very far in gymnastics? What would have been like the American equivalent?
Class 3 back then.
So kind of like a level 8-ish type level. And so why'd you quit? And do you have any regrets about quitting?
I quit because I started to get a little fear in I wanted to do something else with my friends, friends in, middle
Sure.
school. So like that. And then once I said that I wanted to quit, I'm still stubborn, but it was more than, and there was no way I was going to admit that I regretted. So,
But you did.
I
You
did.
regretted
Oh, yeah.
shortly thereafter, and
Like a week
probably
after.
wanted to go back to gymnastics.
and I just
but didn't want to prove all those people right.
Yes, exactly.
Who told you,
We
oh,
told
this
you
is a
so.
mistake.
Yes. I was like weeks on.
I hope they're not listening because now they know that they were right.
My coach he passed away, so he's not.
All right, it's fine. He's dead. He don't care.
But he was like, I was in his office for a whole week because my mom will take me just to talk to. They're trying to convince me to go back. I will sit there in front of him, and he will talk to me, and I was just quiet for probably like 30 to an hour.
I don't believe that you were quiet.
We're just there, and he was talking to me, like, no, not a word until they give up.
And then
like,
2
okay,
weeks
I win.
later, you were like, gosh, dang it, I wish I wouldn't have quit.
But I
now
was
can't
already
go
gone
back.
through all that,
Yep,
being
yep.
so stubborn. So like, no way, no how I'm gonna say I regretted.
But even today, she still talks about regretting
like,
it.
yeah.
So then how did you get into coaching?
So one of my other coaches, but my mom was still friends with them because of the university, right?
Sure.
We ran into each other, and they went to my mom and they asked her what was I doing. So I was in high school then, and they told her, hey, tell her to come and start coaching. We always need coaches. So I went and I started working right away in recreational classes.
Okay, I was going to ask, did you do rec first or did you immediately go
No,
to team?
I did
Went to
rec first,
Okay.
yeah. And I did it for a long time. So from the very bottom and how to, control kids as a high schooler. And then I started doing team because my other coach that was training the team invited me to start doing it. They're trying to get me into judging, which I did not like.
Okay.
And then I just kept going through like my senior year in high school and then all the way through college.
Okay, so as if my audience isn't going to be impressed with the resume I gave them, let's throw this nugget in there. You went to law school, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you graduated.
And I graduated.
While you were coaching.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
all the time.
So where did you attend law school and how did that affect, how were you able to sort of balance being able to coach a team at whatever level you were coaching and juggle the necessary academic rigors of
So I went
school?
to law school to the State University, the same one that my mom worked. And I coached in the afternoon. So my school was all in the morning and then I coached in the afternoon. Back then it was a different system that colleges here in the States. You go from high school straight to law school. There's no in between.
Okay, college.
So
Like law school is not graduate school.
No,
That's what
it
you
just goes
studied
straight.
in undergraduate.
Yeah,
which
I
is
believe it
reasonable,
had
I think.
changed. I believe it's changed nowadays, but I'm not 100% sure. So I was able to manage that. I think like the last year of college, I realized like this is not for me, but I'm already in it. So I am not going to say that I should have gone to another career like physical education.
So then at some point you had to go, nah, the heck with being an attorney. I want to be a coach. And
Yes.
So what was the turning point? What was the catalyst to
So when
cause
I finished law school, I was already, coached my whole for 4 years already, and I started to work more with team. And I really didn't
when
know.
you were working with team, were you getting to work with some of the upper levels?
I was more helping.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't like fully.
But were you
doing
able
it.
to help with some
Yes.
of the upper levels
Yeah,
in there too?
yeah.
And was the system in Mexico similar enough to the system in the United States that you could give us a veritable equivalent? Like I was working with what would have been like American level 8s or 9s or 10s or even elites or whatever.
7, 8s.
Okay.
And then just like working with the choreography with the 9s and 10s.
And was the club where you were doing it, were they a notoriously good club in Mexico?
Yes, the club that I come from is where Denise Lopez trained. She was my teammate. So they have multiple national team members, Olympians.
Good vaulters, which is going to come into play later.
Yes,
where
good
Steve
vaulters.
was taking all your glory from
I
you.
know.
Steve, that's like gymnastics versions of stolen valor over there, mister. We're going to get to that in a little bit.
He's pretty good though. So.
I guess he might have accomplished a thing or two.
Yeah. So that's at the end of my college career. The head coach there asked me like, "Why don't you just do this?" And because you don't know what you want, you're still like in between whether I take my bar exam or not. So I made the decision that I wasn't gonna take the bar exam.
Which that famous Gaby stubbornness comes out again, and when everybody's telling you, take the bar just in case. Take the bar.
Everybody was telling me, you should.
Pardon my Spanish here. What you told them was no.
Yep. Nope.
See what I did there?
Not a
no,
chance.
It's Spanish.
Spanish.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, audience. I'll be here all day.
It was just more gut feeling. Like, this is not what I want. I'm not going to pursue it. I already know that I'm not going to do it. So I just follow. I follow my intuition.
Awesome. At some point in your journey, you actually went up to San Antonio to maybe get like a gymnastics education because your sister lived there. You wanted to learn how to coach. What prompted that? What stage was that? Talk to us a little bit about
So that was
San
towards
Antonio.
the end of when I finished college, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I thought I'd just go stay with my sister and, work on my English. And 6 months, then come back. And my coach had, people that knew in gymnastics in San Antonio, and she's contacted me. And
What was your sister doing in San Antonio?
she was married and really just living here in San
She just
Antonio.
lives
Nothing,
here.
nothing.
She wasn't in school?
Nothing
like
special. No.
UTSA or anything?
No.
Like that? Okay. All right.
So with that, I said, okay, I'll go and see what's up. Really, just to see what was going on in this side with gymnastics, and I ended up staying, loving it.
Who was coaching, or what gym was it?
It was
that
in
you were
South
observing?
Texas, South Texas Gymnastics in San Antonio,
Okay.
and I was there with Henrietta Onodi. She was there too.
Oh, that's right. We did talk about that this morning.
She was one of the coaches there too, and they. I don't know. It was a different. It made me fall in love with the sport, really.
How did you get to the point when did you get to the point where you just said, "Man, I'm just going to stay here in the U.S. and coach right away"?
Not right away. When I first started going, it was just to learn.
Yeah.
Nothing like working. That was never my expectation. It was always, I'm going to be here for this amount of time, and I go back and really work in my club in Mexico. But life had a different plan. So they asked me to stay, and I was like,
that same club
the same club that I was.
Okay, perfect.
And they offered me a place to stay with them, and like everything was like, here you go. So,
and did they help you at the time with immigration? Did you need any sort of help with that?
Well, I already had a visa. I mean,
okay.
I live in the border, so I can literally cross back and forth.
Okay.
Nothing. So it wasn't like I didn't have a
because as
passport.
you guys both know, we have we have like 4 or 5 Brazilian coaches that work for us now because it became a pipeline, and helping them to immigrate here is a huge ordeal. It is actually really difficult. It's relatively expensive, if you get good people like we have out of the deal, it is well worth it. But we've had to help 4 people now be able to make it over here, and I know that isn't inexpensive or
that
easy.
is not. Yeah.
So because of the circumstances of you living in a town that's on the border, you already have like a work visa where you were allowed to come back and forth and do that? Or?
Yeah, no, I have a regular visa, and then when they offer me, so it's really hard to get a visa when you don't have like a huge income. You have to prove a lot of stuff just to get a regular tourist visa. And back then I don't know how it is nowadays.
Probably harder.
Maybe, yeah, it might be harder. So I came here, and they just asked me if I wanted to stay. So I stayed, and they made it really easy for me to actually stay and work. And then I got married, and
no stubborn regrets.
No stubborn regrets.
Okay, yeah, we're glad you're here. I'll tell you what. You're listening to the Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions. Adjusting tuition upward to account for inflation and market tolerance is one of the most difficult and important decisions we as gym owners face. Let Iron Business Solutions take the guesswork out of what you should be charging. We'll perform a full market analysis and deliver a plan to get you into your sweet spot, including a schedule and the wording of emails. Inquire today about our tuition calculator package with a money-back guarantee if your business is already within market tolerance. All right, so let me move on to Steve here. Let's get his early thing. You actually grew up in Australia. So how old were you when you moved there? Why? How did you end up in Australia?
You know, my dad was the managing director of all of the real estate for kind of an oil tycoon here in the States. And they bought land up all over the place. And they did really large developments. And so they bought a big piece of property in Australia on the new border of New South Wales and Queensland. And it was called Ocean Shores. And anyone from the Northwest, there's an Ocean Shores up outside Seattle as well. And they also built that one up. And we originally were going to go over there and get that project started. And it was around a golf course and a community and schools and right on the coast, and ended up staying, instead of 6 months, 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, so I think I was there from about 4 to 11. And,
wow.
It's just a wonderful place to grow up. And that's why I was introduced to gymnastics. They have a neat system over there, especially out in the country,
tell us about it.
Where the police in the community work with the young kids as their athletes.
So they're like the coaches at the rec center. So when little Stevie Jr. shows up at the rec center to do some gymnastics, Officer so-and-so is over there ready to teach him gymnastics.
Yeah, so, it's smart, right? Because if the little kid knows the cops and they're their friends, they don't want to do anything bad or
Well, it does a
embarrassing
couple of things, right?
themselves.
The first thing it does is it establishes a positive rapport between the policeman and the youth.
Yep.
So the youth aren't viewing the policeman as like against them, right? We're all on the same team. And the second thing is it develops this sort of, mentorship where you don't want to let the guy down.
Yeah,
you don't want that
it was
guy to
great.
show up and arrest you.
Yeah, no, I love those guys, and I couldn't wait to go work with them. And it was, was just kind of a throw and go type of a deal. And they'd chuck you up, and you'd do a flip or two, and one or two of them would kind of catch you. And it was
Goodness gracious. That's hardcore, man.
Horsehair mats,
Yep.
And
I guess I have a better
yeah, she had it
equipment.
easy. I mean,
Yeah, she's over there going,
Easy.
oh, man, our gym
It
was
was tough.
terrible. I'm like, the heck it was. What are you talking about?
yeah, and we do little things in the community. You were talking about your springboards had a little piece of bent wood.
Yeah.
My springboards were straight pieces of wood with a bar underneath them, like a diving board. And you move the bar back and forth to make it more flexible. And, we'd dive over the old wooden trapezoid, and then a kid would lay on top that dove over. And so each kid would go higher, and, we'd do little exhibitions and things like that. And I just loved it. I was a fairly
It reminds me, do you ever see those
active.
videos in your news feed on like YouTube or Instagram of like kids doing gymnastics like in Africa?
Yeah.
And their springboard is a half-buried tire.
Yes,
And they
yes.
bounce off of the tire, and somebody's standing on something that sort of looks like a table and spotting them on a souk where they land in a soft pile of dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like what Steve was doing when he was a little kid.
I was.
Except Australia
In
instead of
Australia.
Africa.
And I was
And Gabby's
Loved it.
like, oh man, my spring floor only had valve springs for my
we were diving
spring
over,
floor. What's that?
diving over kids landing in the dirt. But it was really fun, and obviously it worked because I really enjoyed it. And when we moved back to the States,
Which was how old? 11-ish?
11, 12, the curriculums of the PE used to have gymnastics as you'd do gymnastics for a month, and you'd do archery for a month, and so on.
Here, I'll tell you this, and this goes for any of my gym owner people that are listening to this show. One of the things that ETC Gymnastics does, as we call it community outreach, like it's our time to give back. I bought a box truck, like a 14-foot box truck, and have it wrapped with ETC Gymnastics logo and fun pictures on it. And I fill it up with essentially mobile gymnastics equipment. And any school in Rutherford County that will have us, we'll go in and we'll teach a 2-week unit of PE
I love that.
for
that's
free.
nice.
And we don't ask to hand out flyers, nothing, because we just think it's good. Like, we want to reach the little Steve Arkells and the people who don't know it yet, but are going to fall in love with gymnastics, because we think the more people that love gymnastics in the community, whether they take from ETC or take from any of our competitors, the better off we are. Like we want gymnastics to be the thing.
Yeah, it's an excellent way to give back.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So you were in middle school, like doing some gymnastics in a PE thing, and the PE teacher was
My PE teacher was the gymnastics coach for the high school.
for the high school men's team.
Right, for the men's team. And so during that little block of gymnastics time, he said, hey, why don't you walk up? The schools are very close. Walk up, to the high school if you want to, come and work out a little bit.
And instead of having to bounce off of a tire to do a flip, all of a sudden there was actual gymnastics equipment.
Yeah.
Like the stuff Gaby had her whole life.
I didn't know it was so fancy.
Spoiled little brat over there.
Bounce off a tire. That's funny. We used to blow up inner tubes, truck inner tubes, and tape them together and jump and bounce off of them.
Well, we've used them in the past. Those like bounce handstand stations?
Yeah.
Blow up one of those things and let little kids bounce off of the inner tube and do the bounce handstand.
Any way we could, And in high school, we thought we were in heaven because we didn't have one wrestling mat. We had two. We had
Whoa, you could
one
layer
on
those
top of
things.
another one. No,
Man, it took you twice as long to get shin splints.
It did. So I went up and started working out with those guys. And, a great guy's name was Mace Brady. And he's still alive, and he was a hard ass. he was a major in the reserves, so military, and he was a really good trampolinist back in the day. And at the time, I just couldn't stand him because I was a bit rowdy, and he was hard.
Seriously, this is not a joke. I can't imagine you being rowdy. You're so disciplined and methodical and organized and everything. I can't imagine rowdy Steve. But I know we've got some stories to share in a few minutes here that are going to prove.
They beat it out of me back in school. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, so you're doing high school gymnastics. Mm-hmm. Even in middle school, you're at least working out with the high school guys. And at some point, you had to help coach the women's team. What was going on there?
The women's gymnastics coach was a real tiny little gal named
probably somebody who did gymnastics herself.
She did, Kathy Court, and she's probably still there. She was a really nice gal, and so she couldn't spot much. And I was always bigger for a for a gymnast, and so I started helping her and spotting, and so I was in the gym a lot. I was working out with the guys' team and helping the girls' team, and that's how I started coaching. When Mace retired, they dropped gymnastics at the high school, but they kept the facility for the girls, and the men's equipment was still there. And so the Boys and Girls Club of Mercer Island, which is a little community in Washington, sponsored it. And so
you got to continue.
Coached boys my first year. I actually coached the team that I graduated from.
Wow. All right. For our audience who may be younger, where like high school gymnastics was a thing for guys and a very popular thing in our era. And there's a big difference between high school men's gymnastics and club men's gymnastics, mostly in the shenanigans we got into. Give us a couple of like really crazy stories from your high school days.
The best, I think the best story I have was when I was a senior, we got out early. We had to have less credits. And so, 3 or 4 of us would go down, and the gym was set up all the time. It was at the end of the big gymnasium with 2 doors, and we figured out how to jimmy the locks on the doors. So we'd go down early, and we would go in the gym because the teacher used to have to come up from the junior high or the middle school. And so he was always, about 15 minutes late. And we would go in and do all the stuff we weren't supposed to do. We'd put 2 springboards on each other and a couple of 8 inches, and we'd do double fronts. And all the
we did all that crazy crap. We'd get in belts, and our teammates would 2 at a time spot you because we were all the same size, a bunch of little guys, and so it would take 2 of them to hoist you up, and like you could barely do a halfway decent round of back handspring, and you're like, "Get me on this double back! Get me on this double back!"
Yeah, most of the high school gymnasiums they're very tall, and there's usually, they go up and there's a ledge, and I don't know, this ledge was 10, 15 feet up, and the climbing ropes were by it. So we'd climb the ropes and we'd swing and get on the edge, and we'd chase each other around the edge on the, 10 or 15 feet up. And then, the big climax was we'd jump off into the porta pits. And so we were chasing each other around one time, when we weren't supposed to be in the gym. And a couple of us jumped off, and the guy that jumped off in front of me landed between the porta pits.
No.
and broke both his ankles. One of them was a compound fracture.
Oh my gosh.
And so, he's got socks on, and there he's bleeding through his socks, and we don't know what to do. And the other guys are down the ground are scattering like roaches running, getting out of
I wasn't here for this.
And so, we're trying to, pull this guy out of the gym so they don't know we're in there. And they used to have those little intercom systems. And so at the same time, we're freaking out and pushing this thing. Hey, we got an accident down in the gym. Anyway.
But you're trying to pretend like you didn't just break into the gym and do all this stuff. So you drug your guy outside.
We weren't in the gym.
So people are going to show up to this guy who's outside of the gym with a compound fracture and another fracture, bleeding and screaming, and you guys were just going to go, well, I don't know.
What happened?
He was just walking along and his legs exploded.
Yeah, anyway, needless to say, over time they got the story out of us and figured out what was going on.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, we used to, we liked to go to the gym so much that we would do stuff like that.
So I too have a high school breaking into the gymnasium, but I'm not sure the statute of limitations because we did some stuff. So I'll just tell this story instead. When I was in high school, I was a 4-time letter winner. 4 times I was on the varsity gymnastics team. And my senior year, there was an elective class called gymnastics and circus stunts. And it was so cool. Tuesdays and Thursdays were circus stunts days. And we got to ride unicycles, juggle. We had a teeter board. So you could jump off this teeter board. And
that sounds dangerous.
I'm sure it was, yeah. But Monday, Wednesday, and Friday was gymnastics day, and the class was open to the whole public, right? All the schools. So gymnastics day sucked because you had to do these like routines, and it would be like cartwheel, backward roll, and it's like we had doubles on floor and like what. Cartwheel, backward roll. Are you serious? And the coach taught the class, but he still didn't want us to do stuff to encourage these other guys. But so this class was the hour before lunch. And Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, all us guys on the gymnastics team all skipped class because we didn't want to do that crap. We got in a car, we'd take an extended lunch. Tuesday and Thursday, faithfully, we show up. Well, the coach can't flunk us because if we flunk the class, we're ineligible to compete. So he has to pass us. So I get a report card.
Loophole.
Yeah, I get a report card. And I was a good student. I got an academic scholarship. So my mom sees the report card and she says, do you want to tell me how in the hell somebody who's a 4-time varsity letter winner for his high school gets a D- in a class called gymnastics and circus stunts? And I said, I don't know, Mom. I think the teacher didn't like me.
It's the same code.
That's funny.
Not quite as rowdy as I can't even scratch the tip of the iceberg of the stuff we actually did, but there's a good one for you, audience.
I think my friend, I still talk to him every once in a while, still has a screw in his ankle.
Oh my
or
goodness.
something from that. So after Mercer Island, the University of Washington had a men's team as well that was dropped with Title IX.
But wait, don't go to the drop because first you got to get on the team. And I was going to ask, like, you didn't do elite gymnastics. How did you get recruited or end up on the team at UW?
I was a gym rat and always was looking at the university teams going out there. It wasn't too far to go. And one of my teammates, I think he was a senior, a guy named Mark Russo, went out to UW. And so, I was always trying to, be in contact with him. And so that's how I got in out there, not because I was so good, but because I was always there.
All right.
Right.
Any fun or like impressive stories maybe from your days at UW, or there was like a great meet or some really cool thing happened, or?
That was the great thing for me at UW was everyone that was out there, since men's gymnastics wasn't super popular, was really into it, and so, it was a group of gym rats. It wasn't just, one person, clinging, trying to keep the program going.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit maybe yesterday at dinner or whatever, that one of the beauties of it's not really a beauty when it goes from an NCAA sport to a club sport if it drops like that. But if there's a silver lining to that cloud, it's that everybody that's on the club is there not because, well, I've got a scholarship and I need to keep my scholarship. I'm all about business. It's because truly they love the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Mark, the guy I referenced earlier, was my teammate in high school, went on after the program dropped. I think he was the head coach at UW because they went to a club program out there, like a lot do, self-funded. And just a couple people, that had a big influence on me. Jim Holt was kind of the quote-unquote head coach out there. Really good gymnast. He's in Bart Connor's book. A guy named Tim Slotta was there at the time, and he, had a pretty bad back injury, knocked him out, but he coached and helped out. A guy named Scott Morrow, who was a real good pommel horse guy. But a lot of neat people came out of that program. I went on to coach. I was roommates with Frank Lee, who owns Cascade Elite, that went on to be a very good high level coach.
Cascade Elite, man, those guys are good.
Yep, up in Washington. And Wayne Kerr went on to coach Brett McClure and was also one of the owners of Cascade Elite. So, the people that came out of programs like that loved gymnastics.
Yeah.
And were passionate about it.
This is the Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions. Get your gymnastics business to line up with your ultimate vision for your business. Hire one of our experts for an on-site consultation and achieve a better work-life balance. Earn a better income for you and your staff. Get strategic planning for class logistics, hiring, training, and more. Get a financial plan and an exit strategy. All of this with 10 months of support in our custom solutions package. Inquire today on our website or send us a DM on social media. Obviously, you got your start by helping the women's high school coach who was 5'0" and weighed 85 pounds, spotting for her. So how did it transition into something bigger and better?
Well, it used to be that most of the universities also ran club programs out of the universities, to try and make some money because the programs, didn't make any money. And so, Laurel Tyndall used to run that, the Falcons, and that program doesn't exist anymore. They dropped it 3 or 4 years ago. So I would do gymnastics, and then I would work at UW, and then I would drive 15 minutes down to Seattle Pacific, and I would work there. And I'd work with the club kids and the college kids, spotting again. And, it used to be before you had...
And this was, you were coaching women in these clubs.
Coaching women, yeah.
Okay.
I moved over to the dark side, as the men's gymnastics would say.
Listen, it was a wise move because at this point, Title IX was unfortunately killing men's gymnastics.
Knocked out, gymnastics, wrestling, knocked out a lot of stuff back in the day. And so I was driving back and forth. And then I met at the UW. I was working with a little girl named Chrissy Gertis, and her mom's sister had a gym in California, and they were up for that camp. And a gal named Barbara Lassisson, who, was really a great person for me because, like Gaby, I went to California to work for Barb and taught preschool in the morning, and then had a little break, and then went back and did a couple classes, and then did the lower level teams, and built that up, to the point where, Barb built a newer gym, and that's really how I got my start. And when I was a lot of just learning along with my athletes, but having a great time and being in California, and wanting to know more about the sport, especially multiple flipping, twisting. George Harry was there, who was I want to say George was the 65 world trampoline champion. And so he was in Tahoe, so he was a couple hours away, and he had a little gym up there, and he worked with airless skiers, and those guys were doing triples and things back way before, So I went up to visit George and educate myself, and through George met Gerald George, who just a wonderful,
just recently passed,
passed away, and had a huge influence on me because I could just ask these guys, how do you do this? How does this work? And they could explain it, and there was no video or anything.
Sure.
Gary.
Well, heck, at that point, we didn't even have VCRs. Like, how was he going to show you video?
Yeah. A guy named Gary Goodson used to run the IGC programs, and he went into Russia and brought film back. And, pretty much back then you had to study the Japanese, and then the Russians dominated over that.
I remember a funny story from the era of Gary Goodson going over there and videoing the Russians. And when a bunch of the American coaches slowed down the tapes and watched, they're like, hey, all the Russians bend their arms in their back handspring. Now, if you do slow motion of anybody doing a back handspring, there's some bend in the arms. And at full speed, it might look straight, but there is some bend. And it became this thing where they started teaching the technique of have your kids bend and push, which was obviously a tragic mistake, slowing down the back handspring and killing it. But that's, did what we had to do back in the day to try to learn how to
figure
do
it
stuff.
out.
Right.
Yeah.
So take us forward to somewhere in this coaching, you end up co-owning a gym in Portland. Okay.
But, I just want people to understand what coaches used to do, when there was no internet, and,
I'll tell you what I did. I'm younger than you, way younger. You're an old man. That's not actually true. But one of the things I did is I joined USA IGC and got the video membership where they were sending me cassette tapes and then eventually DVDs.
Yep.
So that because they were like, here's how you can get better as a coach. You can watch these videos of other people. And it would come with somebody would staple together the newsletter. Somebody was doing it by hand, stapling together.
USECA was great.
Yeah.
You get video.
Yeah, it was the US Elite Coaches. I said
USECA.
USA IGC, but it was USECA. That's right.
Descriptions and articles and things of that
nature.
nature.
Yeah, we'd see
but
Tammy Biggs and Mary Lee.
But that's what we had to do because there was no YouTube.
Well, first person I went to was I'd go to the Mulva Hills because they were close to me when I was in the Northwest, and watch Dick and Linda because they had a lot of really good kids, and you just go and watch and ask questions, and I went to Mary Lee when she had just opened her gym, or to Kelly Hill when she had Dominique Dawes, and usually they just let you come in and watch. They were happy to do it. When I went to when Caroli came over and I went to Caroli's, he made me spot and help.
Listen, if you're gonna gain some knowledge, I'm gonna save my back. Get in here, young man.
Caroli Gym World.
Well, we talked at lunch today. Even in this modern era, I've done that. I made that little trifecta in North Carolina in the mid 2000s, where I went and saw Han at Everest and Ludmilla at
great
Southeastern, and then my good friend Mylan, who owns Sunshine Gymnastics, and I would just make a week of it and go a couple days here, a couple days there, a couple days there, because even with videos and whatever, there's nothing like seeing an actually good gymnastics coach in their natural environment, just behaving naturally.
Yep.
You can pick up a lot of stuff that way. Well, all right. What's funny over there, Gabby?
No, you guys are talking about just going to states. I switch countries to learn.
Oh yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is,
I guess once again we're inferior to Gabby, who internationally goes, and all we did was move from one state to the next.
If you really want to learn, don't just watch YouTube videos. Actually, go to a gym.
Yeah, because the thing, YouTube video won't answer your immediate questions.
Right.
Like you show up in San Antonio and say, "Hey, Steve, I was watching your kid do this on a Pac Salto, and you never mentioned that. You said this thing. Why?" And then you'll say, "Hey, I also saw that thing, but this thing is more fundamentally important, and this is why I coached it." Yeah.
Yeah.
And most coaches are friendly. Like, you know, I think a lot of people are
More
intimidated by Han at Everest.
Mhm.
And I just asked, and he just said, yeah, come on by, but here's what I want you to do. I know you got a great business. I want you to sit down with my wife here.
And, you know, Gaby's, you know, connections in Mexico. We have national team members from Mexico come and train with us all the time. And, you know, and I trade with you.
Yeah.
Right. I came and did some work with you guys and then was able to sit down with you and ask you business questions about, you know, some different things to make my gym more efficient.
Yes.
So you can trade too.
I think a lot of the people in the small circle that I was initially talking about today are the type of people that are very open and willing to share. Now, when you get to the circle that's just outside of that, my experience is those people aren't necessarily as friendly or outgoing or whatever, but every person that I have asked in this tiny circle, can I come learn from you, has all said yes without hesitation.
Yeah. You know, it takes a lot. And I think that when you start to work at that level consistently, you have an appreciation for other folks that are working at that level.
Yeah.
You know, just,
or even people that aren't quite at that level and want to get there because you remember how hard it was for you to climb that next step of the ladder to get there.
Absolutely.
And you're like, let me help this guy out.
Yeah. Too. And, you know, what you want from your team, especially your national team, is you want it to be a team. And so if your athlete can't get it done on that day, then I want this athlete to get it done. Someone's got to get it done.
We said this at lunch, right? We said a rising tide floats all ships.
Right.
So the better this guy gets, the better you get because you have to.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Nothing wrong. Okay, so now let's move on to Portland.
All
let's
right,
make that leap forward because this is a good story.
I was at a gym in Bellingham, Washington prior to that. And that's the gym it was called Pacific Northwest Gymnastics, where we really got things rolling and started putting a lot of the things that I'd learned and the theories in action. And that was a great program. A gal named Stephanie Sadler started that program, and for one of her daughters, actually, which is how a lot of gyms get started, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those kids, they were blue-collar kids. A lot of their parents were fishermen, hard workers.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt because I think I know where you're going, and then you just correct me. Because I did a year in Iowa, in Waterloo, Iowa, which is a total blue-collar town. In fact, the town sprung up because John Deere opened their company headquarters, and that's where they built all their tractors. And I also worked 6 years in a town called Brentwood, Tennessee, and it's like every Brentwood in every state. It's where all the money is.
Mm-hmm.
And my observation is that it was much easier to coach athletes in the blue-collar town than in the white-collar town.
Yeah, that's
because the parents understand and appreciate the value of a hard day's work.
Well, and if your parent is your example and the people around them, you're going to gravitate towards what you see, and they were hard workers.
All right, we're still not in Portland, Steve.
Yep. So that's where we had a lot of good athletes came out of that gym. We had like 6 national champions, and that's I mean where it really got going, and then moved to Portland, and ended up owning a gym called American Elite, and that's the gym that I had my first elite like national team member, a girl named Sarah Curtis.
And how many partners did you have?
Had one partner.
One partner.
Yeah.
So the elite name actually matched the elite.
The elite name, actually, yeah. That's a pet peeve of Gaby's, gyms that have elite in their name and don't have elites. But anyway.
Well, or even try. Like there are a bunch of gyms that have elite in there and they don't participate in the elite program.
Right. So
listen, it's America. You can call your gym whatever you want.
Whatever you want, yeah.
You can. And that again, that was a really successful program. Lots of national champions. I was starting to get, how they say the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Once you have a template or a system that works, then you adjust your template as the codes change or things like that, or you get better by learning from someone else, and you take what you like that they're doing. Which is what I enjoyed so much about being exposed to the national team coaches. And the way the system worked back in the day is if you had someone on the team or a really close to that, they would send the national staff out to your gym. There was no centralized system at that time, or semi-centralized like what the Corollis put in place. And
Yeah, I worked at a gym that had a couple of elites, and so I kind of remember that.
yeah,
and
them coming out.
and like one of the national team sponsors, I think, was Panasonic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had a kid on the national team, you got some Panasonic equipment. You got a TV and a camcorder that was the size of a suitcase.
But no jacket.
No
I
jacket.
wasn't the coach. I was coaching rec and like the level 3s or 4s or whatever the heck over there. Yeah, so there were no jackets for that.
So
thanks for rubbing it in, Steve.
yeah. Anyway, and so having those guys come out, I mean, Arthur Copian, Muriel Grossfeld, a genius, really. Yeah, very eclectic, but a genius. To come out and actually work with all of your kids. It was phenomenal. And I mean, that's when you really start learning, when you get to pick the brains of these folks.
So it sounds like you had a lot of great gymnastics things going on, national champions, elites, whatever. You owned a part of the gym. How and why did you move on from there?
Long story short, that gym we leased the building, but the equipment was paid for. We didn't have any business debt at all. And I don't like business debt, like scares me. Anyway, they wanted to.
I'm with you, buddy.
back at the time, they wanted to build a bigger gym, and they wanted to incorporate
Station
fitness, parents fitness. like a miniature Gold's Gym.
This is what gym. So many gymnastics gyms around the country in that era, and that sort of very late 80s, early 90s, were all doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And they'd put like little snack bars in there and whatever. And Steve, what happened to every single one of those gymnastics gyms that put a fitness gym in?
Well, in my direct experience, what I decided to do is I didn't want to go into debt for 15 or 20 years. And so I said, all right, you guys, great. If you want to do that, buy me out. And they bought me out. And then they ended up reselling the gym a bit later, and the gym went out of business.
Which is what happens to all the gyms that take on that big fitness thing. Eventually, the fitness puts them under. It's the models for the businesses are so radically different.
Mm-hmm.
We in the gymnastics industry try to set up logistics and efficiency to sell every square inch of space in our gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to occupy it all and sell it. But we know that it's finite. And so we plan accordingly. We hire staff, we buy equipment, we arrange the equipment. And in the fitness industry, in order for them to survive, they have to sell more memberships than they could possibly handle. And it's a difficult mindset to coexist. Over on this side of my building, I'm just going to way oversell, and who cares, because most of the people aren't going to show up anyway.
Right.
Also, the fitness industry is littered with like business practices that are, we know you're going to quit but not drop, so we're going to keep billing you, and you're going to sign a contract that you can't
for
get out
a year.
of. And you sort of got to be a jerk to enforce it. Like all these fitness gyms are jerks about letting you out of your contract and whatever. And over here on the gymnastics side, we're working with moms of little kids, and we don't want the reputation of being jerks. So if you forgot to drop in May for the month of June, and then July comes and you're getting your second June bill, oh my gosh, I forgot. Of course, we're going to be like, hey, don't worry about it, but next time remember, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how you operate in a fitness gym. So if you don't have the ability to compartmentalize those things, and by the way, you're in a gymnastics gym, there's no high pressure sales.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not an impulse business. People don't drive by a gymnastics gym and whip into the parking lot and go, I need to sign up for this. Like, they're deliberate about this. But if you notice, the popular fitness gyms are all on the main drags of real estate because they are an impulse business.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost incompatible mindsets. Not entirely, but it's why it didn't work.
Yeah.
It's why it didn't work. Making a fitness gym work is hard.
I've got a friend in Alaska, Denali Gymnastics. And that's the only gym I've seen make it work, but it wasn't like a Gold's type system. They had an upstairs that was CrossFit. And those people are way more dedicated.
Yep.
And they're there.
But sort of in a regular fitness gym, you don't want your people to be dedicated, because if they all showed up, they can't get on the equipment. They're all going to be angry.
So these guys, CrossFit went nuts. They actually built or bought another facility that was an indoor climbing gym and put CrossFit in there. So, you know, you really have to look at that. But I've never seen the quote unquote fitness gyms work inside gyms.
So once they bought you out, you went to like California, I think, or you spent some time in California.
Yeah, I took a year off and went up to Lake Tahoe for a year and hung out with George some more. You know, I've still a lot to learn from him. And then I took a job at Berkeley for 2 years, coaching college.
And eventually, different jobs in California, the West Coast, you say to yourself, hey, I've got some young kids right now. I don't think I want to raise them here.
Yeah.
And you make a move.
Yeah, Berkeley, I love Justin and Liz and the folks that are there, but it's in between Richmond and Oakland. Right? It's like a little sliver, which are two of the most dangerous cities in the country. So not a great experience for my kids.
So where'd you move?
I moved to Panama City, Florida, which was the exact opposite. So walked away from a national team and collegiate coaching, moved to Panama City.
To a tiny little gym called?
Tiny little gym.
Gymnastics Plus.
Gymnastics Plus, yeah. Mm-hmm. And really started all over again. You know, like level 3, level 4. Yeah. And in Florida, they have a thing called AAU. And so these kids did AAU. They didn't even do USA Gymnastics.
And so Steve Arkell went from one moment to having kids on the national team, lots of high-level optionals, to on the floor coaching kids who are trying to learn a kip.
Yeah,
and that's what you had.
Yeah, that's what we had.
All right.
Yeah, so I'd wake up in the morning and look at the ceiling and, you know, say, where the hell am I?
But quickly, even in a small gym in Panama City, Florida, high-level gymnastics started happening sooner than it should have.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you have the opportunity, and it was an opportunity, to do it again, actually go down to the bottom, the basics are the hardest thing to teach. It's not the finite little things with the high-level kids. You have to be able to see those things and correct them. But if the stuff down low is done well, it's very easy to build on those things.
And there's a lot of satisfaction on those, going back to level 3s and remembering how you started.
I always loved that. So when I was coaching in my entire career, I always did it. So I would bring up a group, coach them up to optionals. And when they got to a certain level, I would go down and get a second group of like little 5-year-olds and take them all the way up and just keep on doing that because it's different. Both of them are exhausting mentally and physically, but differently. Well, so you're mentally exhausted coaching 15-year-olds who are rolling their eyes and whatever, and you're mentally exhausted trying to herd the cats that are the 6-year-olds running around and being crazy. But you don't have to beg the 6-year-olds to do anything.
No, they want to do everything.
But that philosophy or systematic approach like that is what made Woga so great. Because when Valeria and Evgeny were together, one would have a group like the Carly Patterson group, and the group behind them that Valeria had coming up was the Nastia group, and then Evgeny was back down until they split their gyms. So, they have them the whole way. So you got to be
careful in Region 8 talking about Carly Patterson as Evgeny's athlete because she was Johnny Moyel's athlete from the very beginning, and he laid an excellent foundation and brought her to a great level. Now, there's no doubt that Evgeny finished it off, and he's responsible for her gold medal. But without Johnny,
without
who
the
knows?
base,
Yep.
No, absolutely, and that's common in our sport.
Yeah, unfortunately,
to have someone coming up, and whether it's an athlete outgrowing a coach, or a coach some way outgrowing the athlete, or saying I don't want to do it at this level anymore. For an athlete to move on to someone else like Evgeny who finishes that job.
Yeah.
To me, if you're not really egotistical, there's nothing wrong with that. And hopefully it's not a bad breakup. Hopefully you say, hey, this guy can get the job done. It just depends on how you think about it and how attached you are. And
Well,
there's some real nasty situations there too.
I wrestle with that, Steve, because I can see two different perspectives. The first is the coach's perspective. If every time he gets close, the athlete leaves him because they want to go to somebody that's already been there, he'll never be there.
Yeah.
He'll never get a shot. One of them's got to stay eventually. And that could be heartbreaking to be sort of the farm system for somebody else. Just kind of bull crap.
Absolutely.
But I also had a daughter who did high-level sport. And there's a point when, as her parent, I have to go, man, I don't want to break this coach's heart, but what do I believe gives my daughter the best chance to reach her goals, right? And so I see both sides of that, and
I agree.
There's no way to totally be happy with that.
We talked about
especially
earlier
when you're attached
about blue collar, white collar, what you're around, and sure, I'm sure many of the original personal coaches could have gotten the job done with those kids given the opportunity. But I often see kids get to that level and then they want to be surrounded by 4 or 5 more good kids to push them. They want to be around that rather than be by themselves, especially when they get a little older, 15 or 16 years old. So like you said, I can see both sides, but when you pour your heart and soul and years into that, it's hard to just say, okay,
Yep. It hurts.
Yeah.
There's no denying.
But what I would say to those coaches that lose an athlete like that, for whatever reason, is you got to know deep down in your heart, you're the one that built the base and got the job going. Whether they went somewhere else or not, you're probably the bigger piece of that puzzle than where they went. And so you have to have a lot of satisfaction in that.
So since you just spoke to the coaches who are going through it, I'd like to speak to the athletes who are going through it. And remember where you came from. It doesn't hurt for you to reach back out and thank the guy who got you almost there so that you were a good enough product that Evgeny would take you.
Sure, big part of the journey.
Yep. Yeah. Remember where you came from, kids.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to skip way ahead. I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff here. And because there's a long back and forth and very boring story about how the two of you started courting or whatever, because if anybody in my audience actually knows Steve Arkell, everything he does is very methodical and slow and deliberate and whatever. And their courtship is just like that. There's no fun story like he sees her swishing her ponytail and the sunbeams are on her face.
But even if that happened, I would never tell you that.
Oh, man, that hurts. All right. All right.
Or anyone.
I would never believe it at this point. There's no way. I think it happened exactly the way you told me. So let's do this. Let's fast forward to you guys are already together. At some point, you guys say, you know what we should do? Let's open a gym. So what was the catalyst that got you to the point that said, let's open a gym? And why did you select San Antonio?
Do you want to tell the story?
Well, there's a lot of stuff that was the catalyst for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think that's something that we can explain here.
I can. We were working together at a facility that wasn't working out for us.
Yeah,
and
that's a great way to say that.
We were going to go somewhere else, Florida, actually, a very popular place these days. And the group of athletes that we've been working with for a few years and their parents said, hey, why don't you stick around for a year? And, we were invested in these kids. It was a great group of people and a great group of kids. So we said, okay, we'll do that. And that's how we started. And we started renting space.
From Vladimir Artemov.
Yeah, from Artemov. And the program took off. To the point where we were starting to look at the numbers.
The word got out, and then
the
started
money.
to get goals and goals.
Yeah.
And, I started looking at it, and after about a year and thinking, man, if we got a little bit bigger, we could afford a facility. And that's kind of how it started. And we had a really good group of people behind us that believed in what we were doing. And so we had probably 10 to 12 families donate money because, again, I don't like debt. And so, when they talked to us about that, and we talked about moving, Gaby and I found a building. And I said, we will put our name on the lease and we will take that responsibility, the financial responsibility for the building. But you guys have to come up with the money for the equipment.
And by then they had a parent organization going on. So it was beneficial for them too.
So, essentially 10 people donate $10,000 and it was a tax write-off and then give the equipment to us. So we bought all the equipment. So when we started Mavericks, we leased and we owned all of the equipment and put the facility together. And then that's how we started. So we literally started with
no debt.
I don't know, 14 or 15 team kids.
And no debt.
And no debt.
And you were leasing some space. Is that the space that you eventually bought?
We did.
Okay. And correct me, I talked to so many people, especially recently, so I might be mixing up some stories here. Is this the building that Hugs used to be in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Originally, so
there's already gymnastics history. In this,
there was already there.
built to be a gym.
Yeah,
Yes.
built to be a gymnastics gym. And
That's the gym where Ashley Miles came
Who's
from.
now
Who is
she's
the
a,
Iowa State head coach.
there now.
okay.
Yeah. So that's where she came from. Yeah. So
So it's
came,
funny when she walks into recruit, she's like, "Oh,
the
memories."
first time she
Yeah.
came back to San Antonio, I was like, oh, this is bringing back memories. Yeah.
So that's, in a nutshell, that's how it started.
So then when you started, what kind of roles did each of you have?
Well, I'm always been more of the logistic scheduling and trying to have that puzzle going in the gym.
Yep.
That takes a lot of time.
And I think that's a great, the two big puzzles in the gym are the getting the class schedule out so everybody can rotate and whatever. And then the second one is staffing, right? Okay, so that's you.
That was my part, doing all that.
Yeah. And then I did most of the training plans and, kind of what we were going to do within the
So you immediately had to
curriculum.
hire people to coach rec, coach preschool.
We kind of did everything at
Kind
the
of
beginning.
everything.
That's what I was asking.
Yes.
Were you guys in there?
We did everything.
We did everything.
Because
Yeah.
when you guys started,
Cutting foam, putting everything.
yeah, you were older and further along in your career. So when I started my gymnastics gym, I was in my 20s. My wife is 3, almost 4 years younger than I am. So she was in her 20s. And so it really was like no big deal for us to work 65 hours a week and put every coat of paint on the wall, put together the spring. Like you just sort of expected it because you're 20, but you guys were a little beyond that. And beyond that in terms of accomplishments, there's a lot of egomaniacs in our sport that would be like, well, I'm not coaching preschool because I'm an elite coach.
We never saw it that way. It
When
was
we
more like,
started.
this is what you want.
Yeah,
You
and
asked me multiple times, are you sure? It's a lot of work.
yeah, I said I don't know if I want to own a gym again. Honestly, and Gaby really wanted to do it, and it was a good choice. Her intuition was better than mine when it came to that.
But yeah, we did
everything.
everything. I mean, a coach is not there, doesn't show up, no call. You have to jump in.
Unplug the toilets.
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
Everything.
Yeah.
So
And
it was.
we had one parent went above and beyond, one family when we bought it and put in some extra money, and so we took them on as partners in the beginning, kind of like what you've done with or you're talking about doing with your daughter.
Yeah.
Maybe. I hope I'm not letting the cat out of the bag.
No, right now we have no set plans. It's an offer
Yeah.
on the table.
Yeah.
And
Right.
like if she takes me up on it, good for me.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
And so as soon as we got the gym up and running and gotten the positive, we were able to buy them out. And then COVID hit. And
Before we bought them.
luckily, we were in Texas and we were only shut down for, I don't know, maybe
2 months.
2 months maximum.
71 days here in Tennessee. 71 days.
Yeah.
And
So-
I don't mean to brag, but
Yeah.
we got open because of me.
Mm-hmm.
I sent letters and emails to the governor nonstop.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to let gymnastics gyms open. But they were allowing fitness gyms to be open.
Yes.
And I have a really good friend, Tim Richards, in Franklin, Tennessee, who happens to be friends with the governor. So I called him and said, "This is a crime, Tim. We've got to be able to be open." And he said, "I'll call Bill." Our governor's name is Bill Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And then he called back and he said, hey, if you can get a plan that he can present to whoever the legislators or whatever and show how you're going to be as careful as the fitness people, and this is good, then you might be able to do this. He said, but you got to have this plan ready in 12 hours because his meeting is 12 hours from now. And I did. And I sat down and I wrote a 5-page plan outlining everything. And apparently I hit every mark.
Exactly what you need to get.
Yep. And we were approved. And shortly thereafter, I had some friends in Missouri that said, hey, how did you get approved? I sent them the formula. I had some friends in Colorado do the same thing. I sent them the formula. Colorado said no. Missouri said yes. North Carolina said no. But I read enough of what their guidelines were that I found a loophole because they were going to allow camps to be open. And so I said, here's the plan, guys. You're not teaching gymnastics classes anymore. You're teaching one-day camps. And you can have your Monday 4 o'clock camp, your Monday 5 o'clock camp, your Monday, run it just like you normally would. And people are required to sign up for a month's worth of Monday camps and a month's worth of Tuesday camps. And they did. And well, the gyms that listened did it and got open very quickly. So
we just got open.
We stayed in the gym until the cops came and kicked us out.
Well, that's funny that you say that because I literally told my wife when they let us reopen, which was 71 days after the closure. So that would have been somewhere in like mid or late May when we got to get open again. Stuff started to spike again in July, if you recall that. And there were these threats of a second shutdown. And I told my wife, I said, we're not doing it. We're not shutting down because a second shutdown is likely to put us out of business. And by the way, if it puts ETC Gymnastics out of business, all the gyms are going to be out of business because our backup plan always was like, because we're decent coaches. I mean, we're no Steve and Gaby Arkell, but we're good coaches. So it wouldn't be hard if ETC went out of business for Jennifer and I to find jobs.
So just on that note, you know, I know when you were doing elite level coaching and the job you were doing and that you wanted to do other things. But one of the things I have to give you guys credit for is you still are pushing that level of gymnastics. You went out and hired some wonderful coaches and are still doing high level gymnastics because I know you still love it. So
definitely.
Whether you're not doing it, you are doing it.
Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. I'll take the compliment where I can get
and
it.
your coaches are doing a wonderful job.
Oh, they are, despite me. But anyway, so if ETC Gymnastics was going to go out of business, there was no plan B for Ken and Jennifer Harris because that means like our gym's in like the top 3% of the United States for enrollment and revenue and whatever. Like, where are we going to get a job, right? So I said, if we're going to go down, we're going to go down fighting. And I literally told her that I have bolt cutters. So if they come and chain the building, I'll cut the chains and we will teach classes. And when the police come to arrest me, I will live stream this as 6-year-old girls are crying, where are they taking Coach K? Whatever. I will start the Civil War if I have to, but we are not shutting down a second time. And praise the Lord, it never came to that.
And I'm with you.
Yeah.
I mean,
enough was enough.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions. The daily rigors of owning a gymnastics business present unique challenges. Get a gymnastics business mentor, one who's been in the trenches for more than 25 years to walk with you through those challenges. One of our mentors will provide you with strategic business planning, a sounding board for problem solving, general gymnastics business tips, and more. Inquire today about our gold medal business package for a year-long mentorship program with one of our team of experts.
The one thing that I'll say that was really neat for us is all of our team parents kept paying during that 2 months. And
so all of our team parents offered, and I wouldn't let them. Yeah. And I wouldn't let them because one of the things that I've always tried to do at ETC Gymnastics is operate like we're a Fortune 500 company. And thankfully, we live, Ken and Jennifer live well below our means. ETC Gymnastics operates well below its means. So even before PPP was announced or we had any of it, I kept all of my people paid. I kept all of their benefits active. And because we live below our means, I don't have house payments or credit card payments or car payments. So all I had to do was keep the lights on at my house.
There's that debt thing again.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that we say that because my book recommendation is going to be about that.
Well, these folks paid. And
whoever
whoever wanted to.
They were willing.
Yeah.
And I just said, I appreciate that. But what we did is we quickly came up with online courses.
Yeah,
So
we did that.
our teen parents were able to pay a portion because
Mhm.
they were doing a lot of online stuff. And then we came up with some recreational, like pay by the class things because, you know, kids were stuck at home too and bouncing off the walls and parents were crazy. So they were eager to sign up for these classes. What they were
Something
eager
to do.
for was interaction with somebody other than their kid. Because what we discovered is, you know, if you can think back to when your kids were little, like your 6-year-old's going to come home with a half-hour story about a grasshopper. And as much as you love your kid, you don't give a crap about the grass. Will you end the story already? Right? But if you aren't the only person that has to hear that, like, your kid is going to have 14 of those stories. But if their teacher heard 2 of them and this friend heard 2 of them and this friend heard 5 of them, you only have to hear. Well, parents were having to full-time hear grasshopper stories all day. And so it was great for my coach to get on live on Zoom and have 6 little kids in there where they could tell somebody else their grasshopper story and the parents could like shakily have a cigarette and a cup of coffee because they couldn't take anymore. So
we weren't in as good a situation as you. So we took.
No, we're just starting.
well,
So
your
we took
gym
some-
was brand new.
Yeah.
Mine was 20
Yeah.
years old.
So what we did though is after we
And
got
I don't.
back,
There were lots of gyms that did that, and I'm
Yeah.
not faulting or saying it was
No,
wrong
no.
for anybody to do
what
that.
we opted to do is once we opened back up, we paid them all back at $50 a month.
Wow.
So,
yeah, way to
you
go.
know, but I mean,
Way to go, man.
I mean, COVID was a bad deal, but it did do some things, bringing people together, making them work together.
Yeah.
And then after that, the gym took off.
Yeah,
Like,
because
I think
all
people
the
were
all the
ready.
shaky parents with their cigarettes were like, "Get my
We're
kid out of
ready.
here."
We're ready.
And then
Tired of this freaking grasshopper.
the gym just exploded.
Yeah.
Awesome. Does Mavericks Gymnastics, like from a business perspective, not a team perspective right now, do you guys have some core principles or core tenets that you operate by?
Go ahead.
I mean,
Business.
the simple one is our goal was to open a facility that an athlete from the community or a young child could come in from walking age on up, and they could stay under one roof, and they could go from preschool to elite if that's what they wanted.
Yeah. We wanted to offer what we are good at, and we did not know anything about after school or daycare and all that stuff that other gyms offer. We had that very clear.
We have a philosophy at the gym that I think matches that. And the philosophy is, I would rather somebody leave angry because we didn't offer a program that they wanted, rather than leave angry because they participated in a program that did not meet their expectations.
Substandard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's one of, I would argue, your core tenets, even if you don't have it written down that way, that everything that Mavericks delivers is going to meet a Maverick standard of quality.
Yeah, low student to coach ratio, high quality. Even the preschoolers, we have a wonderful preschool director, Hannah, and they learn real gymnastics.
Yeah.
It's fun, but they learn real gymnastics
So important.
that's linear, and it's going to move up to the next level and the next level, and you can build off of that. And so it's just high quality real gymnastics because that's what we know. And so we didn't get involved in a lot of the other things, where we had to buy vans and pick kids up, and like we just didn't have any interest in that either, which is probably why we're not good at it.
Yeah, well,
Right?
why do the things you're not good at? And if down the road you hire somebody that is good at that and has a passion for it and says, hey, I think I can make you a bunch more money.
Yep.
Bring this person in and put them on a profit sharing plan and let them run. All right?
And once we got going, it was too much for us. So once we bought out our original partner, we're thankful, obviously helped us get that thing going. We took on another partner that was more of a rec preschool person.
We needed just that
management.
side, yeah.
That was going to take care of that end of it, which would allow us to do what we want to do, which is to develop the teams.
Yeah.
And she's just done a great job.
Oh, yeah.
Just the gym has grown immensely with her. So, surround yourself with good people.
Yes.
With people
What a
you
lesson.
trust.
And people that want to
are-
work as hard.
Yeah, they're passionate
Another
about what they
tenet
want to do.
probably of Maverick Gymnastics is hire smart people, let them do smart things.
Yeah, and she's it's
She's just taking
off.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's taking it to the next level too. So
Yeah, Kim Rusk.
So if people were going to ask me, like, well, what are some core tenets of ETC Gymnastics? We have more than this, but we have a pamphlet that if a parent comes in the gym and says, hey, what is this place all about? And the pamphlet is titled The ABCs of ETC. And what we say is the A is we are anchored in staff education, maturity, and professionalism. B is a belief in constant parent-coach communication. And C is being committed to a beautiful, up-to-date facility with second-to-none customer service in a Christ-honoring environment. And I kind of feel like I have this, I don't know, belief, and for whatever reason, USA Gymnastics thinks I'm a business guy for there. I think every gymnastics business ought to have something that looks like this, that they have written down on a piece of paper and they review every once in a while. And there's two purposes to this review. The first is to look at it and say, is this still relevant? Do I still believe this, or do I need to modify it? And then the second purpose is that if it's still applicable, you hold yourself accountable. Are the actions in my gym aligned with what I believe about what a gym, or specifically my gym, should be? And if yes, carry on. If no, adjust. Right?
Yeah. So it's basically a checklist for you.
Yes. Yeah. A very broad checklist, but it's a way to even like hold yourself accountable.
That's interesting. I like that.
You guys have some key women's artistic gymnastics like highlights since the two of you took over Mavericks, like stuff you want to. I know probably a billion things, but you got a few things you want to tell us.
Yeah, why don't you tell? You were talking before about how he'd take credit for.
Okay, well let's get there eventually. All right.
Great.
All right, let's go there. Let's go. Let's tell the story.
The vaulting story.
The vaulting story.
So they're responsible for vault and
you guys do.
You
guys do event coaching.
Yeah,
for my audience that's not like super familiar with gymnastics, because I have a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Event coaching means that like if there's 4 events in women's gymnastics: vault, bars, beam, and floor. And then we might also say that there's conditioning and flexibility, whatever, those kind of things. You're going to divide that up and you're going to say, these are my responsibilities, these are your responsibilities. Now, not every gym does that. At some gyms, every coach coaches everything. And I was always in the event coaching school, and you guys are in the event coaching school. So, Steve, what events are your responsibility at Mavericks?
Bars and floor.
Bars and floor,
Yeah.
okay.
And
so Gaby,
vault and beam.
Vault and beam.
Yeah.
All right. So at some point, you two have to be in 2 different locations
I don't
at the
remember
same
if it was
time.
a lead qualifier I was going to.
Yeah, it was a qualifier.
And he was at level 9-10 regionals.
Okay, so you are taking the elite or elites, and you're on a plane.
Yeah, I'm flying.
The 9-10s are competing. Okay.
So the 9-10s are competing, and this particular group of athletes, we had a couple stellar vaulters. One was Kat Lavasor, who just graduated from Oklahoma, and was a good vaulter and a good all arounder actually. And the other was Cambry Brandt, handspring front pike half out, and these guys were always like 9'8", 9'9" kind of developmental kids.
Awesome vaulters.
Yeah, very good vault.
So Kat goes down and does a good vault.
And what vault was she competing at that point?
Yurchenko 1.5.
1.5 laid out. So it's a 10-1 start value.
Yeah, 10-1 start value. And it's a good one, she does. But, I see her do it all the time. So I'm thinking, okay, great, awesome, great. And so I'm going to adjust the board. I'm pulling the horseshoe out because Cambry's next. And all of a sudden the crowd just goes, oh, like quiet. And then, and Kat runs over and says, look, I got a 10, right? And so even though I don't, I help her on vault, I don't coach her on vault. I'm like, yes, a 10. And
taking credit,
of course.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, hey, Cambry can get a 10 too. And so Cambry goes down and goes 9.95. And so, Gaby's got text ability
from the mom,
on
the
the flight.
video.
The moms are like 10. And there's a picture of Kat and I pointing at the 10.
Yeah, Steve's all over social
so
media standing in front of the 10. Thumbs up like he did it all.
One of my athletes gets a 10 and I'm not there and he's getting credit for it.
That's right.
It was great.
Steve, that was a really great job by you, man. You nailed it.
Yes.
Gaby, keep working hard. One day you might get there. But Steve, you really nailed it. I'm proud of you, buddy.
But it's funny because I mean, I had an athlete win championship the USA on vault in like, I don't know, 2002 or something like that. And so people will equate that, like they'll shoot that forward 20 years. And, I'm
That's
more than
Steve
willing
guys are
to
really
take the credit.
Yeah, all right. You do it.
But honestly,
That's one of the.
it was my wife that did that.
Well, we got a 10 one time, we got a 0 another.
Oh, man.
Wait, who had to stand there?
And
for
it wasn't
the
there.
zero?
And that wasn't there either.
again,
So I was
on
like,
vault.
that's his job.
At an elite meet, I had an athlete go down and balk and touch the board.
And you know you're only
And-
one shot.
Yeah.
And
So.
of course, it was our last event, and she was in first place before she
Oh
did.
no!
So I wasn't a flight. I didn't. What happened?
Oh my goodness!
Always a
So-
story like that. Well, yeah,
For how long
you had
did you
one on
strangle
bars,
this
too.
girl?
No, she knew right away.
When
She
I put
fell
my
off.
hands up there, I mean, young kids have to learn by experiencing things, and that was a tough one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can imagine. So you guys have you guys have a couple of Hopes national team members, a junior national team member. You've qualified a senior elite. Just since you started Mavericks together, which was how many years ago?
2017 we started.
I was gonna say it's less than 10 years, so
Yeah.
8 years.
Yeah.
Not quite 8 years yet. And a whole bunch of teams, optional teams,
Yeah.
7, 8, 9, 10, to win state championships. And some states that's easier than others. And I'm here to tell you, in Texas, that ain't one of the easy states.
No,
Right.
it's not.
That's when you say, hey, I won the level 10 team state championship in Texas, it's different than if you said it in I don't know, Montana. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although Montana, I love Montana.
Yeah. I'm not disparaging Montana. I'm just saying there's 8 gymnastics
I've
clubs
got some
there.
good
and,
friends that
and
have
2 of them
gyms
have
there.
level 10s,
Yeah. And no, it's obviously it's different from region to region, state
yeah,
to state.
state.
But if we're all honest with ourselves here, we can all acknowledge Steve is the better vault coach.
Okay.
And we have photographic evidence to prove it.
10-0.
All right. Since I asked you, do you have key tenets or key ingredients for running a successful business? I'll ask you this: what do you value as sort of key ingredients for running a successful women's artistic program at that sort of high level?
Honesty.
I think, honesty, integrity. If you teach your kids to be smart, you teach them why are you doing what you're doing, and they understand it, from a mechanical standpoint. Then just like we used to do years ago, they're going to go play, and they're going to figure it out because they know, okay, it needs to be this way, and they're willing to go and do that, because you can't just dictate good gymnastics.
Sure.
You have to.
Yeah, I think if you make them smart in their sport and understand, where they go, why they're doing what they're doing, and they can also communicate that to their parents. And the athletes are educating their parents too at the same time. So everybody knows the reasons. Right?
Yeah. So, we talked earlier about educating parents, and I know you guys do some.
I'm not
two
I'm not
things.
there to run it anymore, but back when I was, twice a year, I would do judging clinics for my parents. And part of that was because, and we said in the very general, people will fill gaps in their knowledge with any information they can fill it with. And almost always it's inaccurate or bad information.
yeah.
So what I wanted to do was leave as few gaps in their knowledge as I could. And then the second thing was, you get these brand new compulsory parents and whatever, and their kid stays on the beam and gets an 8.8, and another kid on the team falls off and gets a 9.3.
Right.
And the parent immediately goes, well, that judge hates my kid and whatever. The judge doesn't know your kid. They don't care. But if I have a judging clinic with them and explain this is the difference between an up to deduction and a flat deduction, and here are some things that you probably didn't even know that judges were looking at, then there's fewer gaps in there, and they understand. Yeah, my kid stayed on and only got an 8.8.
I've got a great story for you that just recently. So we had a parent complain that we have too many forms of communication. There's too much communication. You need to streamline it. And I was like, yeah, okay.
All right. Or streamline your end. Just choose one of them to participate in.
Exactly.
Now, you might miss some stuff. But.
So another thing that we do to educate the parents, number one, we make the kids smart so the kids understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and they will relay that to the parents.
Yeah.
And their parents are going to know. And we're very honest about where the kids are, what they're doing. We do
set realistic
we have
expectations.
conditioning standards, like I used to have when I did gymnastics. You know, if you couldn't do, you know, X amount of chin-ups and push-ups, you had to be physically fit enough to do it.
Sure.
And that seems to have disappeared a lot from the sport. We do have these minimums to have.
Give me a couple of examples of what your minimum standards might look like.
Minimum standard.
So for the conditioning, we basically it's like our tops conditioning plus other things that we feel their value to our sport, and then we have what do you call it? Like a point system.
And so they have to get so many points. So maybe if the
level
kid
10
is
is 100.
15 years old and she can no longer do like a Stalter press, which
You
sometimes happens.
You can recover
But
something else.
Yes, you can be good at the chin-ups or be good at
That's
the
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
There's a bonus
There's a
system
bonus
in
system
place.
for that reason.
I mean,
so
you
it's
have-
fair.
You have to be to a minimum standard.
Yeah.
At least, you know, and, you know, if they can't do a press forward, they should do 5 backwards with gravity.
Okay.
Right. And what we do is we test the athletes once a month, and the results get emailed to the parents.
So the parents
are
know-
aware. Yeah.
The
know.
parents can like look over the last
Sure.
6 emails and go, hey, wait, my kid is trending this way.
Right.
Let me ask her some questions.
Yeah.
Rather than go to the coach surprised at the first meet of the year and her kid stinks.
Yeah. Physical abilities doesn't really lie.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, plus when you use a system like that, you can make your athletes symmetrical, make them safe, make sure they're good pushers, they're good pullers. If they're not good pullers, spend more time on pulling and less time on pushing.
And make them aware.
So it's individualized. And also to educate parents that it takes years, and athletes, right? So in our point system, a level 6 would have to get 60 points, a 7 would have to get 70 points, and by the time you're level 10, you get 100 points. And if they're not to that minimum physical standard, we don't compete them at that level because in our opinion, that's not safe. And our number one job is to keep our athletes safe. And they've got to be very strong and very durable to do this, right? And you know, it's not holding them back, it's keeping them safe.
Let's say they were level 9 in 2020 and got the 90 points, no problem. And then the next year could only get 80 points. What did you do then? How would you respond if such a thing happened?
We have had some kids both ways, right? They're not up to their level or below. They have dropped on the next season, but they're aware of it. And since everything's written, they know what's the specific condition they're missing. We give them the opportunity to, okay, you do extra of that part, or do
we give them time to fix it.
Time to fix it. Yes.
Okay, I
That
see.
makes sense.
I see.
So during their conditioning, do you have this conditioning plus 2 of your weakest from the test? So they have that chance to keep it up and like bring it up.
You build the individually into the system, but you know the reality is some kids grow out of our sport, which is fine,
Sure.
right? And you know, as they get older and their balance points change, maybe they can't do as many presses.
You know who doesn't? Oksana Chusovitina.
Yeah,
Just Tina.
Isn't she about to be 50?
Mhm.
And I just read that she's literally going for another.
Yes.
She's actually looking pretty good.
Golly.
Yeah.
Golly.
Amazing.
No
Talk
way.
about freaks. Right?
Yeah.
That's some good genetics. All right, you guys have been coaching elite forever, right? If you were going to give just a couple of pieces of advice, and I'd like to hear each of you give at least one, to a young coach who was wanting to break into the elite world, what would be some stuff you'd say?
I'll say pay attention and be patient. And
So when you say pay attention, are you talking about pay attention?
to the coaches, to the other coaches that are doing it right now?
Oh,
Like,
okay.
Who's there? Who's doing it? What are they doing that you're not doing?
Okay.
Pay attention, really listen. And if you're not the kind that asks questions like myself, I really paid attention. Like, what are they doing? How many repetitions really like intensely watching, and then be patient with your athlete. So you have to know your athlete and know how to pace her to get to the results that you think they're capable to do.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I would say to a group coming up now, have excellent basics. Right? Be maxing out the physical abilities and be extremely dance and artistry oriented, because there's a big jump there right now with the turning, the toe point, which I know a lot of people don't like the changes in the code that are moving towards artistry, but another way to look at that is
I absolutely love it.
I do too. It's going to reopen our sport at the elite level to kids that can dance, kids that can move. Not just the tumblers.
It was moving in a direction that was like almost X Games like.
Very acrobatic.
Yeah. And got away from some of the things that now, don't get me wrong, man. I loved seeing Simone do a triple-double. Let's go. But I also loved watching any of Al Fong's kids do a floor routine or do a beam routine. It's just beautiful.
Harmony
Yes.
is amazing what those guys do.
So it's funny. This is the second time in the podcast so far that you mentioned good basics. And this doesn't, in my mind, maybe this doesn't apply to elite, but here is a philosophy I've always had. In mathematics, you remember PEMDAS, order of operations? Like there's certain things in math that go first. PEMDAS is parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. That's the order that you do things. So I always told my JO coaches that were working in my system below me that we have a gymnastics order of operations, and it goes like this. The first thing you get right is form. Because the truth is, in the elite world or the JO world, the most amount of points you can get is through form and execution, right? Get form right first. Because everybody in the elite world starts at 10 from execution, and the best elite, like D scores in the world are a low 6.
Yep.
Right?
And the 7s, yeah.
Do we have some 7s now? The second thing I wanted you to get right was body positions. And for me, the way I taught gymnastics is there's 3 body positions and you got to get them all right. Hollow, tight arch, and flat. And you have to pay attention to what those hips are doing in each one of those things, because otherwise what you think is hollow is actually pike. And what you think is flat might be flat in the back, but pike in the hips. And it's, pay attention. So get positions right, because if you can have great form and good body positions, you can be a great level 7 or 8 with very little actual gymnastics knowledge, right? Make your kids strong, have good form, good body positions, and they're going to be able to do, like on vault, they ought to be able to do up to a layout, like a layout Yurchenko or whatever, just by having good form, good body positions, being tight, right? You could do a layout. And then with a little bit of gymnastics knowledge, you can get further than that. And then I always said the third thing that you had to get right was amplitude, right? Get the splits to 180, get the jumps to so high, get the tumbling to so high, whatever.
Execution is
and then everything else.
Critical.
Yeah.
Right? And the good execution and what the judges are taught to look for is good gymnastics. It's safe gymnastics, right? They're doing 2 to 3 D turns on floor and a little less tumbling. They're not doing all E and F passes. And so what is harder on your body, a D turn or a double back?
Well, obviously the D turn is easier. Like your body is taking much more of a beating
it's not going
on
to
a double back
as much. So there are some advantages to the new system as well that I really like. But execution basics,
but wouldn't
symmetry.
Then what I think, I wrestle with what you just said there a little bit, Steve, because I don't want a kid who's got 3 different D turns to beat the kid who's got 3 different D flips in a routine, because no matter what they say about a D turn, it isn't as hard as a D flip.
Compositionally,
that's true.
You have to have both.
We talked earlier that my wife and I are super competitive, and so we did event coaching, and she was.
Did you you tell me you're winning right now?
Well, depends on the competition. Like some of them I am. So way back in the day, we would have competitions because we did event coaching and she did floor and beam and I did bars and vault. And we would always have a competition at the meets.
We compete.
We compete all the time.
Who scored higher, beam or
Yes.
bars?
And the kids know when I say beam beat bars today. Come on.
And whoever won got to pick where we went for dinner.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, we
And
haven't done that.
Let's do that. That's a good idea.
And what used to kill me, now this was a bunch of quads ago, but if you can recall this, back at level 9 in the day, you could do straddle jump on beam and get 2/10 bonus. Frickin' straddle jump, 2/10 bonus. And to get 1/10 originally in level 9 bars, you had to connect 2 flight skills or a flight and a turn.
Yeah.
In fact, you wouldn't even get a 10th if you did a free up to handstand and a bail because it counted as a non-flight, non-turning C.
Yep.
And the bail counted as a C, so you got nothing. So I would do free up hand bail and get a thanks for coming, and she would do straddle jump and get 2/10 bonus. And that, man, I'm like, this is bull crap.
You know what, Ken?
Well, same thing on floor. You can do 2 pass routine and then get like this 9-6.
You needed to have more circles because if you did 3 different circles, you got 2/10.
What was that true way back in
It was.
2004?
I'm
Okay.
just giving you a hard time.
Well, no, it's a fair point. I didn't read enough in the code to know that I could do that. So
no, bars is its own animal.
it is, and so she
No matter what
got to
anybody
pick dinner
says.
more than
Most of the time.
So a lot of times, if you saw Jennifer and I at dinner after a meet, I was eating like this. Stupid level 9 freaking straddle jump.
Bars is hard.
Yeah. Why don't each of you tell me one thing that when you look at Mavericks that you're most proud of?
I have to think about this.
Yeah, I sprung this one on you.
Yeah,
Steve did
yeah.
that to me to start the day. Take that.
As a gym and business, how the most proud of I am is that how fast we have come to this point. Like from where we started in 8 years, like you mentioned.
Less than 8.
Yeah, less than 8. How quickly we got to where.
And we
to
were
where
even
we're at
talking
right now.
on the way here. I won't share any numbers, but by the metrics that Iron Business Solutions uses to measure the economic health of a gym, that you guys are like the needle's way over in the green.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that because when we started, we were
We were broke.
we were
Yeah.
broke. We have nothing. So
We were broke monetarily, but
Yeah.
not gymnastically.
Yeah.
I guess,
Amen.
Right?
All right. What about you, Steve?
Well, I really appreciate what Gaby said. I think what I enjoy the most is having our athletes that have gone through the program come back. Whether it's our college kids coming in to visit or Kathy bringing her rings in to show the little kids.
Aw.
or having dinner with former athletes when we go to meets.
When we go to meets,
Yeah.
if we have kids in the area, doing that and having our athletes come back and coach for us, come back and want to be a part of the organization.
They
Because-
loved what y'all did together so
Yeah,
much that
and
they want to continue to be.
The success of the program and the monetary stuff is awesome, but I think it's the lives that you touch and help, even if they're not great gymnasts.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the fighting and the working and the coping skills that can be gained. I always say the best athletes that I've had and really the best people, the most successful people I know, they are good at going from problem to problem to problem and solving and moving to the next one because it is, isn't it? Everything we do is moving from one thing to another thing to another thing.
Yeah.
And the people that can be happy and figure it out and move on, the athletes that can do that, the coping skills that they gain, and things become an opportunity and not a problem. And so I like it when the kids come back,
Awesome.
as adults.
Great answer. I love that. I feel similarly. What do you guys have as some like current business goals for the gym?
Well, right now now that we're reaching that point that, okay, we pretty soon here we're going to start running out of space. It's time to think about, can we possibly open a different location, expanding this one? How can we utilize our current building to create more revenue? But, we wrestle with that. Do we want another one? Do we have the time to do that? So this is just thinking and like open conversations, having partners also.
We could do a whole show
Yeah.
on this because
Yeah.
I
What's
feel
the next
very
step?
strongly you guys could do another one.
Well,
because you're system-oriented people, and with the right systems in place.
Yeah, move
This
the
is
easy.
template. And that's part of the reason that we started talking years ago. When I first met you at like championships and things like that. I started to pick up on the systematic approach you have to business, right? Which is where this new business came from,
Right?
right?
Yeah.
And so I'll hire you to come in and help us streamline what we have, and then see, okay, really, what do we have, and should we open something else out, right? Just like someone would hire me to come in and help systematically approach their
Someone who would do that.
program, right? Then, I want someone like that to come in and help me streamline my business. Like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, right?
Right.
I have a whole nother story, but we're running short on time. I don't want to share it, but what I will say is, for my audience that doesn't know, I literally, when I was trying to be good and we were trying to get kids qualified to championships and stuff, I asked Steve if I could pay him to come into my gym and do sort of a checkup and help me out to get better, and he very graciously agreed to do it. So when I was joking around like, who would do that? Well, I would do that. That's who would do that. So recently, USA Gymnastics, particularly in the women's program, has had a bunch of leadership changes because we had the big scandal that was exposed in 2016, and we've gone from the Carolis to, for about 5 minutes, Valeri Lukin, and then we got Tom Forrester, and now we have Betty Aquino. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about maybe your thoughts, because you've been on the inside during all of this, and maybe just give us a quick thought on each of the regimes, and then let's talk about what you think about the latest appointment, which was Betty Aquino. Let's spend a little time on that.
So
go ahead.
okay, I was at the end of Marta when she was just on the developmental and Valerie was entering, so I got to experience that side, and it was strict for everyone, athletes and coaches. It's exhausting, really. It was. And then quickly to Valerie, it was a change because me coming up into that world, he taught us a lot. He was very invested in the coaches.
His vision for the centralized system was one of education.
Yes.
And rather than sort of Marta's vision, if I was going to describe it politely, I would say her vision was one of accountability. She was going to hold you accountable to your kid being good. You better show up and your kid be good,
we were stressed.
Right? And Valeri's system was one that said, "Hey, I'm going to educate you. If you're not good yet, or where we want you, I'm going to give you the tools to be that way." Okay, keep going.
So that's a part of Valeri, which a lot of coaches came from that. New coaches came from that those camps, and then by the time Tom was more analytic, he was telling like, this are just the stats, this is where he's going.
I'm a data nerd.
Yes,
so
very
I
data.
Really relate to Tom's analytics. Like, I love that. I can stare at a complex spreadsheet for hours and be giddy the whole time.
Yeah, and I think that was what we needed at the time, because that's where the big change happened. And kudos for him to stepping up and fulfilling that spot. I think a lot of coaches, we appreciate that he did that. And then Chelsea and Alicia and Dan, the trio step in. And that was more like a lot of coaches knew what we were doing, so we just show up. It wasn't a lot of teaching the coaches. It was more like trying to get the kids together, and it was right after COVID too, so it was a lot of it was a little, I want to say messy, but it's not as.
I mean, Tom was still involved right after COVID. It
Yeah.
wasn't
Mhm.
until
It wasn't after the Olympics when he left.
Yeah.
And then, so that was a struggle of like, that's not a lot of kids in the program. Because of that, there was a lot of dropping. A bunch of the developmentals decided that they didn't want to do it after COVID. And then we go into Betty. Betty was there just doing dance, but I personally feel that she will do a very good job. She's very, she's observant. She pays attention. She's serious in what she does, and she's direct. She will tell you in a very, positive way how to do things. So I have very high hopes. I'm happy for her that she got that job. So
Yeah, I like the way Gabby's saying this. I'm a bit older than her, just a bit.
do you get the real the real
I
deal? with the camp?
came in at the end of Bella.
Yep.
And then Marta, and then Valerie, and Tom, and then Alicia and Chelsea. So it's my philosophy is I want to learn what I can from everybody, and so I learned from all of those people. And you need to just looking at them as coaches, throughout all the other political stuff that's going on. From a coaching standpoint, I always felt like Bella was a fantastic motivator, right? And he was good with numbers too. He knew how many you needed to do, what you needed to do, and so that's the good things that I took from him. That I thought, okay, I see what he's doing. I want to do that. I learned a lot of discipline from Marta. She was an extremely disciplined person, I mean, she would go in and do morning training, and then she would go out every day and she would walk a couple miles around the lake, and then she would come back in and do her thing. And, I experienced her in the United States from a different side, a different country. And we were at Pan Am's, and we watched the U.S. at their championships like on a Thursday night or a Friday night. And then that team got on a bus and came to Canada the next day and did full routines in the morning. Getting ready for Pan Am's. And, so being in America on the other side, having to face that team and how good and strong and disciplined that team was, and watch him do that was just like, oh man, I mean, that system was very, very successful and disciplined. And those kids were ready
and not
to
without
go.
its faults. It's not like we're sitting here
all of them.
like
I'm going to point out the
glorifying
good things.
Yes.
About what I got from all of those guys, because you know what?
I just didn't want my audience members to think that Steve Arkell thought Marta Caroli was a saint, because I know you well enough to know you don't feel that way.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm going to point out the good from everybody.
Good.
And
I like to keep the
that,
positive
in my
going anyway.
opinion, as a coach and as a person, if you want to learn, you take what fits your system and what you support, and you put that in your system. If you don't like something, you don't put it in.
Yep.
You don't do it. You don't mimic it. You don't copy it. And then Valerie, I learned a lot in the time that I was lucky because I had little kids when he just took over the developmental program from
and he
the-
was
from
highly
the
invested
tops.
in the little kids. He
And-
was really
Yeah.
trying to make that class of
and
little
that's
kids.
that's the word that I would use is I felt like he was invested in the athletes, even if it was going to take years to develop. He had a long-term plan, and the tips and cues that I got from him really, really worked well. And he was tough. If he was walking around, whoa, you're paying attention. He commanded that, that type of respect because of what he'd done and his approach. But I found him to be positive and tough, but let's face it, it's any sport
At this level.
at the upper level, the elite level, it's hard. No matter what anyone says, it is hard. And, one of the, I think as a coach, one of the greatest things that we can give our athletes through the disciplinary program we run is self-discipline. And my most successful athletes have had self-discipline, not me, like anybody needs to be taught that, right? But once they are smart and they have self-discipline, they can get it done. It's a tool. Discipline is a tool, in my opinion, for someone to take and to use to make the decision to get themselves better, to do the extra rep or whatever it's going to take. I've heard different coaches, I heard Kelly one time, Hill, when they were changing the conditioning a little bit, one of her athletes asked her, how many leg lifts is it? And she says, I don't know. She says, but what do they tell you to do? Just do one more. Right? A simple approach from an extremely successful coach.
And for the people, my audience members who don't know who Kelly Hill was, she's had multiple Olympians, probably her most famous Olympian being Dominique Dawes, who was in 2 Olympic Games, I believe.
Yeah. Like you, I like the analytics. I like to look at the numbers. And Tom was excellent at that. He was good at kind of mapping things out. Like if you start here, it can turn into this and this and this.
The other thing that I think we would agree on about his analytical ability is when he would review the analytics, he was excellent at predicting. Like he was very accurate and looking at the data and saying, I think it's heading in this direction, so this is how we should prepare.
And he really paid
and
a lot
I don't remember
attention.
him being wrong.
No, pay attention to the rest of the world. Like this is what they're doing. This is what
which is important. So all of these things are good things that people along the way.
So what about the latest
can learn
regime change down in the developmental arena, which was the appointment of Betty Aquino?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of respect for Betty, and I think one of the greatest strengths she's going to bring to it is the artistry.
Yeah.
Right. She's been doing dance for us for a long time. But remember, folks, she was an Olympian and she came up in the Caroli system.
In the Caroli system, yep.
So she's lived it and she knows it. And, it's like, the best way to say this, if you have someone that came out of the Beijing Institute 20 years ago in China and they're trained to do something a certain way, that's probably how they're going to do it. Okay. Now, is what came out of the Beijing Institute 20 years ago what is going to be applicable to what we know and do today? No. Right? So everyone has to evolve and change as they come along if they're going to survive in the sport.
Have you seen that
Adapting.
evolution firsthand in Betty Aquino? Because I believe I have.
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the good things, in my opinion, is she will bring more leadership, more discipline back into it because the program kind of swung away from that. And, you can't just let it be a free-for-all or people are going to get hurt. Things aren't going to get developed. The country's not going to move together in the right direction. And I think she's been around long enough and been through it, and she's intelligent. Right?
Yep.
She cares about the kids, and she cares about the USA and about the team. And what better place to start to, revamp our program than from the bottom up.
So in fact, not to put too fine a point on it, but I happen to know that this is true, that prior to the announcement of her appointment, USA Gymnastics asked you if you would consider participating in, not necessarily leading, but participating in this program, and you conditionally said, if Betty's in charge, I'm in.
Yeah, I support her 100%.
Yeah.
And
she's worth supporting.
It's a big undertaking, but I know we're all excited and looking forward to it. It's an opportunity for all of us, and especially these young coaches and kids to help them along.
Somewhere out there is a young Ken Harris who's trying to learn to do this, and the way these developmental camps are set up now, that guy's going to get an opportunity. And if he pays attention and is humble enough to learn and receive.
Yeah. And the staff is excellent. Mike Hunger.
Yeah, when I was participating in there, I really loved the staff. We had, it was three people who rotated in and out of bars. They were Mary Lee, Pete Arenas, and Ryan Roberts. All very different styles of bar coaches, but all of them excellent at coaching coaches and coaching athletes.
Always more than one way to get to something.
Yvonne
Alexov.
The two Yvonnes we had on floor, right? And Lumi was always there on floor.
Awesome.
Mike Hunger on vault. And, he's my brother from another mother. We could be twins.
And Tammy, Tammy Biggs.
On beam and
so
Betty
much
at
experience.
dance. It was just I felt like when I was participating, I was getting a world class education when I was there. So
yeah, and that's the idea, to give some ideas, some direction, and that people can take what they like, what fits their program, and they can work it in.
So as I wrap up this part of the show, we talked just a tiny bit about this, but I want to hit on it. One of the things I was excited about is I heard a rumor that they were going to start having international competitions that hopes athletes could participate in. And it's going to be self-funded, which, not to put too fine a point on it, but because our gym is so financially successful, I didn't care. Like, who cares? Like,
sure,
send them wherever they got to go, get them a jacket. Get them a jacket. And maybe I could convince Alessandri or Hayani to give me their jacket. Anyway, you have some different thoughts on that.
I mean, the thing is, it's good for the athletes to go experience that. It's great to expose them to that. A lot of other countries do it
already. Why aren't we? We're freaking the USA.
When they're little and they go to Woga. Like you see little Japanese girls there.
One of the things
weekend.
that was great in Canada is they
out.
sent teams out all the time,
and even the little guys. But
the little guys.
You didn't like the self-funded part. Talk to me about that, because I thought you brought up a really great point that made me go, oh yeah,
I think it's
probably right.
I think it would be an honor to go out and represent the U.S. But everyone needs to understand that if you're going to self-fund, you could take an athlete from ETC, you could take an athlete from Hills, you could take an athlete from Mavericks, put together an all-star team, and just go do it yourself.
There's some gyms that have done that with the meeting.
Yeah, and beat the U.S. You could theoretically beat the U.S. because the best kids at that age group say, well, we got to pay for itself. We're not going to represent the U.S. We're going to represent, invent our own
independent
country. Call it like
it's a lot easier in Europe to travel around because things are closer. But still, I mean, if Canada can send these young teams out.
Yep.
And participating in some of those
Steve,
meets
I'd like you to
awesome.
get the ear of some people at USA Gymnastics and get this funded, because ETC has a couple of really good Hopes kids right now, and I want that jacket, Steve. I want that jacket.
Yeah. On top of the jacket for Coach Ken, the experience.
Yeah.
We took Mavericks
to gymnastics
years ago. We took a team to gymnastics, and when one of our elite kids competed in the elite portion of it, our level 10s did the level 10 portion of it, and it's a fantastic meet in Montreal.
I've had back-to-back guests where you're never going to believe this, where because the system is what it is here in the United States, both of their first international experiences were at world frickin' championships.
Yeah.
Right? And so to your point, like, hey, we need some experience and whatever. How would you like that? Sure, you're going to be, hey, whatever. All right, let's go. I'm going to world championships. But at the same time, like, can you imagine the pressure that they must have felt and whatever to wow, I get to compete for the U.S. for the first time. Oh my gosh, it's at world championships. Right?
Yeah.
Not knowing, fighting for equipment, time.
Think back on when you did gymnastics.
I was terrible. I wasn't going to compete for the U.S. I was lucky they let me compete for my high school.
Isn't there some meet that was just a blast where you went, what you did, the team you went with?
Yep.
Right? So to give these young kids the experience to do that, for the U.S. or for your own little all-star team, and lots of regions in the developmental program.
So I've so far had like 4 or 5 guests that at least competed at world championships, and 1 or 2 less than that competed in the Olympics that have been on this show. And it's funny that you say that, because When I ask them to recount their Olympic experience, like talk to me about your bar routine or whatever, they almost inevitably can barely recall it. But if I ask them to like talk to me, if I just say in general, talk to me about your Olympic experience or your world championship experience, they all start telling stories about fun things they did with teammates on the plane ride there.
That's
in
what
the
you
hotel.
remember, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
that's what I remember from my gymnastics
Yeah.
career, like that. Those breakfasts as a team and, going for a walk or,
Yeah. That's
even
what it's
the-
all about,
yeah.
honestly.
some
like,
joy.
because so
Right.
few of them get to that little tiny dot in the middle of this circle. Most of them are out here in this circle. That your athlete isn't going to remember what they scored or what place they got at the San Antonio Invitational.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're going to remember is, oh my gosh, at the San Antonio Invitational, I stayed in a hotel with this teammate and I peed my pants. Like that. You know what I mean? Like that's the stuff that they're going to take with them.
Those
We
moments.
all have a kid pee your pants.
Yeah,
Don't we?
yeah. Boy, I
I
could
don't
do
know
a
about
whole
you guys.
episode. Listen, you guys, it's been a pleasure to have you guys both on the show and hang out with you here in Nashville. And before you go, I want to ask you guys the same 2 time machine questions I ask all of my guests. So the first one is, if you could go back in time and undo any one decision that you've made, what would it be?
Undo one decision I made was don't go to law school. Stick with
Nice.
just stay, listen to your mom's advice, which was do something sport related.
Oh, your mom told you
Yes.
that, but everybody else was telling you to go
But
to
she
law
was
school.
so
Yeah.
stubborn.
Yeah.
If-
I would have thought that you would have said, "Hey, don't quit," because you had the regrets. But I like that. Don't go to law school.
if there was one thing, and I'm looking at not just gymnastics but life. I had a dad that was a kind of a functioning alcoholic, very successful person, but I would have tried to understand him better and what was going on, and help him a little bit more. Maybe be more supportive, because that was really hard on him later in his life.
Sure.
And so that would be the things that I would change.
If you had one piece of advice for young Gaby or young Steve, what would you give them?
Listen to your intuition, that gut feeling, that first thought. That's the right one. Don't overanalyze.
Awesome. That has clearly served you very well. In fact, we talked about it either some on this show or before the show. Steve?
Mine would be to meet Gaby earlier.
Meet Gaby earlier so that I can methodically start my very boring courtship that isn't even worth talking about on the show. Okay. All right. Finally, I like to ask all my guests for a book recommendation. What do you got for me?
I got with Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey.
Okay.
And it's about all the opportunities and how you perceive the things that are happening in your life. And is it something that's going to stop you, or you're going to move forward? And it's a green light, right? So it's easier just to see the good side of it. Like, what do you learn? Move forward. It's a great book.
Fascinating. And from lunch, I learned that you listened to it on Audible, and it's actually read by Matthew McConaughey, and it makes the experience better.
Much better.
All right. Listen, I recommended on this show somewhere in the first season for people to read Tony Dungy's books. He's got 2 of them, and I also did them on audio, in which Tony read them. And there's in one of the books he's talking about because his adult son commits suicide, and he's breaking up when he's reading the part from his book, and it's heartbreaking and devastating, even if you're just reading the words. But to hear the man that lived it breaking up when he's doing it, oh man, there is something powerful about the author reading the book to you. Steve, what do you got for us?
I really enjoyed the book, The Boys in the Boat.
Boys in the Boat.
Which is a true story.
Which they made into a movie, but was not even close.
Read the book.
Yeah.
The book goes more in depth into
their lives,
struggle of these young gentlemen that came up during the Depression, and what they had to endure and go through as individuals to come together as a team, and essentially as a JV team of rowers that made it to the Olympics and the struggle to do that. And they won the 36 Olympics in Berlin with Hitler.
Just a couple of guys who were like literally hungry. And I don't mean hungry to win a championship. Like,
No,
we got to find an opportunity that'll
to survive.
pay us a sandwich.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is the opportunity they found and ended up being of that mold that they just worked so hard. And I don't want to give anything away, but
Yeah. Well, you know, it's like what we do, right? You have to overcome, open the door, climb the wall to find out what's on the other side. You know, and the more you do that, probably the more
Name of the
success
book
you're
again?
gonna find. The Boys in the Book.
Or
the
Boys in the Boat.
Boys in the Boat.
Boys in the Boat. All right, my recommendation this month is for Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace. I was given a copy of this book the year before I got married. And I'm here to tell anybody that'll listen right now that that book absolutely changed the trajectory of my life. That because of that book, while I was coaching gymnastics for somebody else, not making a lot of money, I was able to pay off all my debts and save enough money to open my own gym. And because I operated my gym by the principles that Dave Ramsey teaches in this book, I was able to turn it into a grand business that has literally changed the financial trajectory of at least the next generation of my family. I would encourage anybody to read it. It's easy. It's a lot of common sense. It makes a lot of sense when you read it. But when you were talking earlier that you're adverse to personal debt or whatever, so is Dave Ramsey. And he's got a lot of good reasons and thought behind.
Yeah. You were talking about Dungy.
Yeah.
And for a lot of you coaches and young coaches, go back and read about some of the great older coaches,
Yeah.
you know, the Woodens and these people and what they were able to do. A book that struck me that's very interesting is a book called Bowerman and the Men of Oregon. And it's about when Bill Bowerman, who ended up, you know, with Nike and you know, with the shoes, how he went to Europe on his own dime and brought it back to the States and created the dynasty of Oregon track. Steve Prefontaine, for some of you guys that know any of the great athletes from the 70s. And it's very, very interesting read.
It's funny that you said, we got to wrap this up, but I'm going to mention this anyway. Well, you said periodization. And in the very, I guess, very early 90s, I had a college roommate, and to this day, we're still very good friends, who was a high-level swim coach. He's had a couple of his swimmers go on to the Olympics and dozens and dozens of them to Division I scholarships. And I was just getting into coaching gymnastics and trying to learn everything I could. And I didn't hear from anybody in the gymnastics world about periodization of conditioning, but they were already doing it in swimming. So when I was watching him write up his workouts, I started asking a whole bunch of questions and said, hey, this makes sense. I'm going to do the best I can to take this and turn it into conditioning for my athletes and see if we can. And there were some things I got really right in there and some things I got really wrong. But like, you know, swimming and gymnastics aren't quite the same, but philosophically it was really good. So
yeah, so USA Gymnastics used to do a really good job educating coaches as to that. If you go back to Bill Sands.
Bill Sands, yep.
And, you know, the book, The Fifth Event, if you go back to Jerry George and the safety manuals that he wrote and all the great information that those guys had. But read something by either one of those guys. And
Jerry George was a good personal friend of yours.
He was a great guy. He really, he communicated in a way that I understood. And so I grew in leaps and bounds talking to him. And you know, kind of listening to his ideas and philosophy, which are all proven.
Yeah.
Super smart guy. And guys, look up Tudor Bompa. He's the father of periodization. And you know, read some of his books.
All right. Thank you to my producer Tom, for accommodating us today. And if you want more information about the many ways Iron Business Solutions can help you reach your vision for your gymnastics gym, visit us on the web or social media. Links in the description. If you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media. As usual, people, until the next episode of Stick the Landing podcast, brought to you by Iron Business Solutions, I'm Ken Harris with Iron Business Solutions, and we'll have stories to tell and solutions to deliver for your gymnastics business. See you next month. Hey, if you enjoy this podcast, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to all of our social media and leave us a review. Links in the description.